Part 39. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 386. It has to be said that Lan Feiying's words indeed exceeded Musian's expectations. If she hadn't said it herself, and even taken out Yayu's ring at this time, Musian would still not be able to believe that the chosen one he had been looking for was always by his side. Last time, he was still thinking about why the people chosen by Tiandao were all male monks. Unexpectedly, this time Tiandao chose a female cultivator, and she was someone he knew. Musian has always had complicated feelings for Lan Feiying. As for her feelings for Lan Feiying, she naturally likes her. After all, Sister Feiying was the first person who never disliked him when he was a playboy. Of course, the maid may also be like this, but she won't show it. If it were such an intimate relationship now, she would only give Musian a look full of disgust when he asked for some special fun games. Lan Feiying is the opposite type to Wei Mengru. If Musian asks to play some fun games with her, she will only accept it with a smile. Oh, maybe he will also tease you during this period, look at you condescendingly, and step on high heels to tease. What's wrong? I decided to tell you the truth after struggling for a long time. Whether it's surprise or disbelief, I should at least show some expression. Lan Feiying smiled charmingly and stared at Musian's face. The lines on her face were handsome, the tip of her nose was straight, her lips were thin, and her eyes were bright and dark, which contained the charm that should be expected at this age. His slightly pale skin made him look even more frail, enough to make an older woman feel the desire to protect him at a glance. Musian came back to his senses and looked down at the Naja that appeared in Lan Feiying's palm. So, you killed Yayu. But he is a man of great luck, so he shouldn't die so easily. Lan Feiying said with a smile, when I found him before, his luck was almost exhausted, but I didn't kill him. That's it? She placed the ring on the table. The next moment, a faint light emitted from the elegant room, and a pure and compassionate-looking woman in a red dress appeared silently in the field of vision. This is a very beautiful woman. Although she is not as youthful and lively as a girl, she is mature and dignified after years of experience. Musian raised his head and glanced at her. For some reason, he felt inexplicably wary. How come it's not Yaishan? Why is there a different person? Musian asked doubtfully. Yao Shan seems to have died. This is the spiritual consciousness that Yayu saved in Ji Yuan Palace. As for her identity, let her explain herself, Lan Feiying said. The beautiful woman smiled and stared into Musian's eyes, her beautiful eyes sparkling. This is the Musian mentioned by Feiying, little friend Mu, right? He is truly a talented person. At the end of the sentence, she fell from the air lightly, sat next to Musian, and said with a smile, I think you should have heard of my name. Among the four pillar gods of the southern wilderness, the one I control is space. Musian looked surprised. Are you the fourth pillar of God? It seems like you've heard of my name too. Shuiyi looked into Musian's eyes with a charming smile. Thousands of words are hidden in her pure eyes, but there seems to be some special emotions hidden in those seemingly pure and beautiful eyes, but it is very obscure and not noticed by others. This junior has interacted with Nanhuang several times, so he naturally knows the name Shuiyi. The smile on Musian's face faded a bit and he looked at Lan Feiying calmly. Why did Sister Feiying mention this to me? If you kept it secret, I wouldn't have known that Yayu's incident was related to you. Lan Feiying smiled lightly, as if she was not surprised by Musian's inquiry. Her voice was charming and very high quality. If I keep this matter hidden in my heart, I will always be estranged when I see you. If I make it clear, there won't be such a gap anymore. Musian was silent. Did Yayu's luck be robbed by you? I did it, but at that time I just planned to send him into exile in the void, but Senior Shuiyi thought that we should be more decisive, so we took action to erase Yayu's existence. Lan Feiying had a gentle smile on her face, took a sip of tea to moisten her lower lips, and continued, although yeah, you can be regarded as saving Senior Shui, but someone who can bully his master and destroy his ancestor, no matter what, no one will trust them. Not long ago, she witnessed everything in Ji Yuan Palace. Musian was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, that's right, yeah, you does fit this term exactly. He deceived Yao Shan and even planned to kill his ancestor. He deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors, and yeah, you took all of them. But the other meaning of Sister Fei Ying's words is that I'm afraid I should be careful about Shui Yi. Mu Jian understands this. It probably hadn't been long since Lan Feiying got the ring that stored Shui Yi's spiritual consciousness. She didn't know much about the southern wilderness evil god, so it wasn't surprising that she would be wary of Shui Yi. At this time, Musian suddenly shuddered in his heart and subconsciously raised his head to glance at this pure and beautiful woman. For a moment, he even felt like he was being targeted. Shui Yi blinked her moist and pure beautiful eyes and tilted her head slightly. What's wrong? Fine. Facing Shui Yi's gentle gaze, Musian's eyes pretended to be panicked and he looked away, lowered his eyes and remained silent. The corners of Shui Yi's mouth raised a faint arc, and suddenly said, I can only show up for a limited time today, so I will go to meditate and rest first. She glanced at the empty teacup on the table and said casually, the tea here seems to be gone, why don't you ask someone to add some more? After that, Shui Yi quietly returned to the ring. Lan Feiying glanced at Musian, then smiled and nodded, Brother Mu and I still have something to talk about, so let's go and add some tea first. She lifted the veil and walked away with a sexy step. Musian closed his eyes slightly, digesting this huge amount of information. Lan Feiying is the chosen one chosen by the heavenly Dao, and can even plunder the luck of others. But she took the initiative to mention this to me, which at least shows that she has no hostility. After all, Feiying is also the elder sister I have always trusted when I was in Tianqian City. But the heavenly Dao is not a fool, how could it choose a chosen one who is so friendly to me? Could it be that he is trying to seduce me? Humph, you underestimate me too much. If I don't wear fishnet stockings and high heels, I will never be seduced. The ring on the table suddenly lit up with a faint light, and then a mature and dignified woman's slender figure appeared in the field of vision. Musian opened his eyes and said in surprise, Senior Shui Yi? Do you have anything else to do? Sister Feiying hasn't come back yet. The fourth pillar god of the southern wilderness showed a worried look on his round and dignified face, and sighed softly, although I have escaped from the Ji Yuan palace by chance, I am only a weak spiritual consciousness after all, and I may dissipate between heaven and earth at any time. If I can't find the body I tried to prepare when I was in the southern wilderness, I'm afraid I can't hold on for long. Musian was slightly stunned. The Ji Yuan can even trap the powerful people in the Hedao realm. Shui Yi said faintly, there are many complicated formations in the Ji Yuan, and often a formation contains thousands of magic arrays. In order to seek a way to break through the unity of the Tao, I ventured into the abyss, but I didn't expect to be trapped by the array of the person in the coffin. If you and others hadn't come, I'm afraid I would still be trapped until now. Musian asked curiously, the identity of the person in the coffin, do you know who it is, Senior? Shui Yi shook her head slowly, I have never seen him. The tall southern wilderness god sat down next to Musian. She was wearing a charming red long skirt and a plush cloak. Although she was wearing a charming dress, her face was pure and beautiful, and the moisture in her beautiful eyes made people feel pity. Shui Yi reached out and gently stroked Musian's face, her beautiful eyes seemed to be full of charm. Friend Mu, you are a natural furnace, and you are very talented. Can you help me in the future? You are the only one I can rely on. The sweet and gentle voice, the fragrance that was gently exhaled on the face seemed to be accompanied by an intoxicating fragrance, like a demon playing with people's hearts. Every frown and smile seemed to be haunting. Musian seemed to be really attracted by her, staring at the pair of moist eyes full of charm. After a while, he blushed and lowered his head. I will try my best, but please don't do this, Senior. I already have a Taoist partner. It's just to help. What are you thinking about? Shui smiled lightly. A hint of cat and mouse teasing flashed across her beautiful eyes. Musian hesitated for a moment, then nodded modestly. Okay, I know, I will try my best. That's great, I'm so happy. Shui smiled, tilted her head slightly, and clapped her hands lightly. But although you said so, what exactly do you need my help with? Musian pretended to be confused. Actually, I'm looking for a body. If I go to the southern wilds, there may be a way, Shui said softly. Musian asked with a little curiosity, Senior Shui, do you know the name of the owner of that body? I still have some power in Dongzhou, maybe I can help. If the three southern wilds evil gods had promised, she should be the saint of the southern wilds now, Shui said. The seemingly sickly beauty appeared in Musian's mind, and his eyes flickered slightly. At this moment, the sound of high heels stepping on the ground came from outside the house. Shui said softly, my friend Mu, I have a limited time to leave the ring. I will not disturb you and Fading today. I will find a time to visit you another day. The pure and beautiful figure returned to the ring silently. Lan Fading walked into the private room with enchanting steps. The fiery red cheongsam wrapped her beautiful and sexy figure. Musian saw the long white legs under the slit cheongsam at a glance. It looks good, but it's a pity that we can't see more skin. After all, the cheongsam is too tight. Musian raised his head and smiled, looking at the lively scene outside. It seems that the alchemy competition has ended. Lan Fading glanced at him with her charming and affectionate eyes. Why are you saying this for no reason? Do you want to see your sister Lingxian as soon as possible? Musian looked back at Lan Fading and smiled. I was just talking casually. Is Sister Fading jealous? Do you think I'm the kind of jealous woman? The moment their eyes met, Lan Fading seemed unwilling to admit defeat and stared at Musian, as if she wanted to suppress him in terms of momentum. Then she stared at him, and finally she gave in. Her delicate and charming face was slightly shy. She looked away and said lightly, don't you have anything to ask me? Musian poured a cup of tea for Lan Fading. Sister Fading is favored by heaven, which is a good thing. As for Yayu's matter, although it is a bit regrettable, since it is Sister Fading, it doesn't matter. If he gets rid of Yayu, I think the Tiansheng furnace will be able to absorb Yayu's spiritual energy, and then give it to other protagonists. But it is not unacceptable for Lan Fading to get Yayu's luck. Yayu's luck was just plundered by me, but I can't bear more luck. Lan Fading glanced at Musian lazily. I originally thought that if you are interested, I would transfer this luck to you. Musian was stunned. In addition to the spirit dragon, is there anyone who can give luck to others? The spirit dragon is the most favored creature in this world, and I can give others luck not because I am favored by the world. Lan Fading said with a smile, if you sign an equal contract with me, I can completely give Yayu's luck to you. When she said this, she inadvertently glanced at the props displayed on the system interface. Equal contract. After signing a contract with a living person, you can sense the other person's position and share a portion of your great luck with the other person. Musian looked at Lan Fading deeply, and then nodded. It's okay for me, but won't Sister Fading feel sorry for the luck? A smile appeared in Lan Fading's beautiful eyes. It's okay for me, but don't you suspect that there is something wrong with the contract? Under normal circumstances, it is impossible for an equal contract to share luck. You also said that it is an equal contract under normal circumstances that cannot be done. Musian smiled lightly, but your contract should be a system prop. Lan Fading licked her tempting red lips, pondering Musian's words just now. You really know it? She took out a piece of parchment from her bosom and placed it on the table. Inject your spiritual energy into this letter paper. Musian stretched out his hand and placed his palm on the letter paper, and then circulated his spiritual energy and quietly injected it into it. "Is this all right?" he asked. At the same time, he felt a little emotional. "I didn't expect that after dealing with two chosen people, I would actually meet a chosen girl who was already close to me. It's really amazing to think about it this way." Lan Fading nodded slightly and said, "As long as I inject my spiritual energy into it, the contract will be concluded." After that, she also circulated her spiritual energy and was about to inject it into the contract. However, just as she injected her spiritual energy into the contract, she suddenly found that the contract had never moved. Lan Fading's eyes flickered slightly, and she reached out to grab the parchment. She scanned it with her spiritual consciousness, and there was indeed no spiritual energy of Musian left in it. How could it be possible? The contract cannot take effect? The private room fell into a brief silence. Musian hesitated for a moment, and looked at Lan Fading's somewhat strange face with suspicion, and said, "Sister Fading, what's wrong?" Lan Fading slowly raised her eyes with a slightly unbelievable look, and opened her rosy mouth slightly, looking at Musian. "I can't sign a contract with you." Musian hesitated and said doubtfully, "Is it because of the heavenly Deo?" Lan Fading shook her head gently. "Impossible, the system is not under the control of the heavenly Deo, and the prop contract given by the system is the same. Moreover, the heavenly Deo cannot directly interfere with the behavior of the cultivators, and can only influence them in the dark. But it stands to reason that this contract does not have any requirements or restrictions." Lan Fading murmured to herself. "Then what do you think is the reason, Sister Fading?" Musian picked up the sheepskin contract and looked at it for a few times, raised his eyes and asked. After a brief silence, Lan Fading said softly, "My contract does not have any requirements or restrictions. If there is only one restriction, it is only one." She took the sheepskin contract handed over by Musian and pointed to the text described on it. "Sign a contract with a living person." "A living person?" Musian whispered to himself. His expression slowly solidified. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 387. Only the living can sign an equal contract. Conversely, if you are not a living person, you cannot sign a contract. After sorting out this simple logic in his chaotic mind, Musian's smile remained unchanged, and then after a brief moment of daze, his smile stiffened little by little until the smile slowly disappeared. If there was a bronze mirror on the table at this moment, he would see the whole process of his expression from a faint smile at the beginning to gradual hesitation and finally sluggishness. Such a change in expression is impossible even for an actor with superb acting skills. Musian stared at Lan Fading dully, and as if to confirm that what he saw was not an illusion, he picked up the sheepskin contract again and looked at the text displayed on the contract. Except for the extremely concise description above, there is no further explanation. "How is it possible, how is it possible?" Musian said with difficulty. "Sister Fading, do you think it's a problem with your system props?" Lan Fading shook her head gently. "This prop was given to me after I got rid of Yayu this time, and I have never seen any problems with the props given by my system." Musian said blankly, "But if I am not a living person, how could I still be sitting here and chatting with you? If I have no breath of a living person, there will be several great masters who have met me. Don't they see it? Even though most of the great masters he knew were not the real body, and Yao Meng's spiritual energy was not fully replenished at the beginning, what about the queen of the demon realm? What about Shang Yanfei? None of them can see that they are not living people?" Lan Fading also had some doubts in her eyes. "So I am also confused. Logically speaking, there is nothing wrong with your aura. Is it really the influence of heaven that makes us unable to sign a contract?" Musian's face was extremely subtle. "No. Just as you said, heaven cannot directly affect the contract between you and me. If heaven can really interfere with others directly, it would not deliberately choose the Son of Heaven to represent its will. Even if it is heaven, it must also abide by the rules of heaven and earth, because it cannot easily modify the rules and order between heaven and earth. But if so, the fact that he and Lan Feiying cannot sign a contract now is inexplicable. Musian's face was extremely ugly. He knew that he was undoubtedly alive now, but Lan Feiying's contract was wrong now, which was completely inexplicable. Could it be that I have become Schrödinger's Musian? Musian couldn't help but complain. Lan Feiying hesitated. Schrödinger. Well, this involves scientific knowledge, which is a bit complicated to explain. Musian was in a subtle mood. He picked up the teacup and wanted to drink some tea, but found that the tea was empty. He put down the teacup. For example, if I am put in a box, there must be two results in the box, either life or death. But the external observer can only know whether I am dead or alive when he opens the box. Lan Feiying's eyes moved slightly. You mean, my contract cannot determine whether you are dead or alive, so you and I cannot sign a contract. Now Musian is equivalent to being in a box, and this sheepskin contract is the external observer. As long as the box is not opened, it is impossible to know whether Musian is dead or alive. Musian said to himself, in other words, although I am dead, I am also alive. Because I am in a box now. To be precise, I am similar to Sister Menro. Someone erased my existence a long time ago and blocked the secrets of heaven, so no external observer can confirm my life or death. But why did the other party do this? Blocking the secrets of heaven, even the system props that do not belong to this world cannot distinguish his life or death. That person spent so much effort, could it be just for fun? Lan Feiying's eyes flashed slightly, and she was in doubt. If so, it can indeed explain why this sheepskin contract cannot be signed with you, because to it, you are neither alive nor dead. She stared into Musian's eyes and whispered, for this sheepskin contract and even my system, there is no such person as Musian in this world. Musian gathered his scattered thoughts, looked at the sheepskin contract on the table, and after being silent for an unknown period of time, he suddenly shuddered slowly. Most people in Zhuzhou know the name Musian, but the system outside Zhuzhou cannot determine whether Musian is dead or alive, and even thinks that there is no such person as Musian. Now that I think about it, when did I stop belonging to this world? Was it like this from the beginning, or was my existence erased after I awakened the memory of my previous life? But if so, why does the heaven know my existence, and even let the chosen one step on me as a stepping stone in the dark? Musian's face was extremely ugly, as if he had thought of an incredible and bold guess, and his eyes widened slightly. What's wrong? You seem to have thought of something. Lan Feiying asked with concern, her charming eyes full of concern. Musian did not answer, his brain was running at high speed. Thinking about it carefully, the heaven has always regarded me as a stepping stone stepped on by the Son of Heaven. But I have such a close relationship with the heavenly court. Not only can I modify the rules of the heavenly court, but there is even a new heavenly way in the heavenly court, which wants to replace the 9 provinces heavenly way. Why does the 9 provinces heavenly way know nothing about it, and has never even targeted me? Instead, just treat me as an inconspicuous stepping stone? Because of disguise. From the beginning to the end, I was neither a villain nor a stepping stone. Instead, I was deliberately assigned the identity of a stepping stone in order to block the secrets of heaven and let heaven only treat me as an ordinary stepping stone to deceive others. Musian took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. After restraining his divergent thoughts, he asked, Sister Feiying, since the system has come to you, can you see my information and so on? Lan Feiying sighed softly, I would like to, but this system only gives me tasks. After completing the tasks, I can redeem props from the points mall. There are no other functions worth mentioning. When she said this, there was a hint of regret in her tone. If I had known this, I would have left Yayu to you to deal with it. Sister Fei Ying treats me so well, and she also knows how to give up money to the later heroes. Musian felt a little warm in this cold winter, and his face softened a lot. If it doesn't work, forget it. Although it's a bit regretful, I can accept it if it's Sister Fei Ying, Musian said with a smile. It's just that he obviously hasn't recovered from the shock of just knowing the truth, so his face is still a little pale. Lan Fei Ying's beautiful eyes were worried, and she suddenly put her arms around the back of Musian's head, and then pressed her gently into her arms. Musian's face was buried right in the heart of a gentle human heart. Although there was a layer of Cheongsam material between them, he could still feel the weight and softness of the human heart. As the charming sweet fragrance filled the air, Musian closed his eyes slightly, as if he could not help but be immersed in the warmth. In this world full of intrigues, only the human heart can be somewhat warm. Lan Fei Ying stroked Musian's hair, lowered her head slightly, her eyes were gentle, and said softly, "Don't worry, no matter what the will of heaven is, I will always be on your side." "Even if it goes against the way of heaven?" Musian suddenly asked. Lan Fei Ying lowered her eyes slightly and chuckled, "To me, you are my only good brother. Do you still remember what you told me when I first arrived at Tianqian City?" Musian was silent for a moment and said, "In the future, I want to marry a woman like Sister Fei Ying." That was before he had awakened his past life memories and was not yet a playboy. The Mu family in Tianqian City has a great business, and everyone is afraid of it, and Musian is the eldest son of the Mu family, with power and no control. A boy under 16 years old. Well, it's not surprising that you are blinded by beauty. But even when he was a playboy, Lan Fei Ying never disliked him. The atmosphere in the private room seemed a bit silent and ambiguous. Lan Fei Ying looked down at the young man in her arms, opened her mouth, and wanted to say something, but in the end she held back. After an unknown amount of time, Musian left the heart full of sweet fragrance, raised his head, and stared at Lan Fei Ying's charming eyes and seductive rosy mouth. When their eyes were fixed on each other, everything seemed to be hidden in their intertwined eyes. A. At this moment, a beautiful voice like singing suddenly came from the room. Musian suddenly woke up and turned his head suddenly, only to find that there was a woman beside him at some point. This was a very beautiful woman with disheveled silver hair. She was holding a big meat bun in her hand. She lowered her head and took a bite. Sensing Musian's gaze, he hesitated for a moment and handed it to him. "No need, you can eat what you want." Musian waved his hand reservedly. Lin Ling groaned and glanced at the tea on the table. Musian understood immediately and poured her a cup of tea. "Please." Lin Ling took a bite of the big meat bun, took another sip of tea, and repeated the process gracefully. After finishing the big meat bun, Lin Ling licked her fingertips again, feeling a little unfinished. Lan Fei Ying looked at the woman in front of her in surprise, still in a state of astonishment. She knew that Lin Ling and Musian were related, but she didn't expect that the relationship between the two was so close. "By the way, Sister Lin Ling, what do you want from me?" Musian asked after seeing her finish eating. Lin Ling squirted some water from the teacup and wrote on the table, "You must have encountered some trouble, so I am here to help you." Musian was startled. "How do you know what problems Sister Fei Ying and I encountered?" Lin Ling blinked her beautiful red eyes, then turned away silently and whistled. "I blew hard, but no sound came out, so that my cheeks became bulging and angry." Musian held his forehead silently. He always felt that when he came out of Lin Ling, the style and atmosphere seemed a little different. "Forget it, since you know what problem I encountered, do you know how to solve it?" Lin Ling nodded matter-of-factly and wrote a sentence on the desk. "The second share of heavenly chi can absorb the luck voluntarily given by others and use it for one's own use." Musian was stunned, looking at the innocent-looking silver-haired beauty in astonishment. "What a coincidence," he murmured. "I should have finished writing it last night, but there was an epidemic here yesterday, so I went to get nucleic acid test early in the morning. First update today, there will be a big chapter in the evening. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 388. Yaokai Holy Land. Have you prepared the invitations? Yao Meng opened her eyes, ended her meditation, and looked at Fairy Yao Xian with a smile. Yao Xian nodded gently. The wedding invitations have been sent to the major ancient families and Lianji sect in Dongzhou by activating the secret method. When she said this, she couldn't help but hesitate, and continued, Saint Lady, what do you like about Musian? Just because he saved you once. It stands to reason that with the vision of the Qing Emperor, he shouldn't be interested in a cultivator in the refining spirit realm. It's not that she hasn't come into contact with Musian in the past. Apart from his appearance and some talent, he has nothing outstanding. As a result, the Qing Emperor saw that this was not just for fun, otherwise, he wouldn't have asked people to prepare the invitations for the future wedding in the Yaokai Holy Land. Yao Meng wore a green skirt and leaned lazily in the void. Every inch of her skin was stained with a faint fluorescent light, which was breathtakingly beautiful. If you look closely, you will find that at her flawless white ankle, you can vaguely see a faint green petal. After inheriting the first seat in the heavenly court, the power given to her by the word Lin is hidden in this green petal. Facing the questions of the younger generation, Yao Meng gently shook her head and smiled softly, it's not entirely because he saved me. Then what exactly is? Yao Xian hesitated. If you have to say it, it's actually just that I'm greedy for his body. Yao Xian was stunned for a moment. Translated, it means I want to him, Yao Meng said gently with a holy smile. Boom. Yao Xian stood there in a daze, feeling a rumble of thunder exploding in her mind. Then, the three views that she had established for a long time in her heart collapsed, and she just looked at the wedding invitation in her hand and fell into a long daze. Sister Lin Ling, I've heard that a person can only hold one heavenly chi at most, and more is unbearable. Are you sure it's okay? In the remote and quiet Linglong cave heaven, Musian followed Lin Ling on a small path, and finally couldn't help but speak when he saw the silver-haired beauty walking in front of him. In the past, he had heard that a person could only bear the blessing of one heavenly chi at most, and if he rashly tried to refine more heavenly chi, he would be backfired by the heavenly chi. Existences like Lin Ling are aliens in themselves. Normal people, even powerful people in the Hedeo realm, cannot refine multiple heavenly chi. Even as strong as Lin Ling, when he carried 3 heavenly chi, he often suffered from the pain of the karmic fire burning his heart, so he often meditated in his own cave to suppress the karmic fire in his body. It was not until he handed over the first heavenly chi to Musian that Lin Ling finally let go of himself and ran to Tianhe Garden to find Musian for free food and drink. And now, Lin Ling actually planned to give him 2 heavenly Dao Chis in a row, so it was no wonder that he was worried. AAA. Lin Ling nodded as a matter of course, took out a piece of white paper, and wrote on it, you took a Dao heart pill before, and the Tiansheng furnace has expanded once, so there is no problem. The heavenly Dao Chi has always been stored in the Tiansheng furnace. Under normal circumstances, a furnace can only bear one portion of heavenly Dao Chi, but the Tiansheng furnace is special, and with the blessing of the Dao heart pill, there is no such concern. Sister Lin Ling is really thoughtful, Musian said thoughtfully. Lin Ling took out 1,000 paper cranes from her arms and handed it to Musian. Paper crane. Musian stared at the paper crane in Lin Ling's hand and hesitated, is this also part of the ceremony? Lin Ling held the 1,000 paper cranes and slowly threw them out. The 1,000 paper cranes slowly floated up in the swaying, and then turned into a faint ray of light, quietly pouring into Musian's Tiansheng furnace. Thump. Musian's heartbeat suddenly accelerated a bit, and he subconsciously covered his chest, feeling the burning sensation coming from his chest. The paper crane had turned into the chi of heaven and entered Musian's natural furnace. Lin Ling raised her hand and continued to write on the cardboard, "I have prepared the formation here in the past, you can refine the chi of heaven here with peace of mind. I also need to meditate for a while, after which you can leave this place on your own." Although Sister Lin Ling is usually greedy, she is quite thoughtful in this regard. Musian looked at Miss Lin Ling, who was wearing a white long dress and was generous, and couldn't help but sigh from the bottom of his heart. Lin Ling just snorted, and of course said AAA, trying to imitate the calmness of the sect master's sister. Watching Musian walk into the formation, cross-legged and meditate, she was about to retract her gaze. At this moment, the karmic fire in her body surged silently, accompanied by the love poison that had remained for a long time when the 3 portions of heavenly energy blessed her body in the past. Lin Ling's legs could not help but soften. She hurriedly held onto the wall beside her and slowly slid down to sit on the ground. Her mouth was dry, her body was numb, and her breathing became heavier, so that even her full breasts wrapped in a sea blue dress rose and fell slightly. Having suffered from the burning heart of karmic fire in the past, Lin Ling was naturally very clear about her current physical condition. Karmic fire can be barely suppressed by one's own spiritual energy, but the love poison accumulated by karmic fire over the years can only be suppressed by one's own willpower, or... She slowly raised her bright red starry eyes and looked at Musian, who was not far in front of her. After staring for a long time, she closed her eyes slightly again to keep herself calm. "It's been so long, a little bit of love poison is nothing at all." Tianhe Garden. Bairuoxi was sitting in the pavilion, holding a cup of hot tea in her hand, playing chess with Ye Lingxian. There were windproof curtains on all 4 sides of the pavilion, and charcoal was burning in the pavilion, bringing some warmth to the girls in the pavilion. Bairuoxi twisted a white piece in her hand, straightened her back, and the thin collar could not cover her full and straight chest at all. Her long hair was scattered to her willow waist, and her temperament was weak and beautiful. Sister Lingxian has really become the topic of discussion today. Not only did she win the alchemy competition, but I heard that Mu Lang also kissed you in the competition, she suddenly said softly. Ye Lingxian smiled and said, "Sister Ruoxi should know that brother Mu is born with the blessing of the furnace, and I think she has guessed why he did this." Wei Mengru took over the topic. "His natural furnace ability is much more complicated than before, whether it is for you or for him, this secret must not be leaked." After this, the girls in the pavilion looked a little strange. Ye Qian glanced at Wei Mengru intentionally or unintentionally, and said, "Sister Mengru said it was for us, then what about you? If brother Mu was abducted by other girls, don't you care?" Wei Mengru looked indifferent. "I am just his maid, I will not interfere with his private life. It has always been like this when I was in Tianxian City, and it has not changed now." After saying that, Wei Mengru also felt that she was a little suspicious of trying to cover up, and opened her mouth to explain again. But she noticed 4 very subtle little eyes in the pavilion, so she turned her face away silently, giving a few people only a cold and beautiful profile. At this time, Yesiyu, who had been pointing at Ye Lingxian from behind, suddenly raised her head and looked up into the air, hesitating. "What do you think that is?" Bairuoxi raised her head and looked up, only to see a fiery red paper crane flying from outside Tianhe Garden in the air. It was obvious that the paper crane was heading for Tianhe Garden. Wei Mengru's beautiful eyes flashed slightly, and she raised her hand and decisively grabbed the fiery red paper crane in the air, grabbed it in her hand, and then opened it. It turned out to be an invitation. A trace of doubt flashed across her beautiful eyes, and then she slowly opened the invitation to read the contents. In Linglong Cave Heaven. After nearly 2 hours, Musian slowly opened his eyes, raised his hand and stretched out his palm, and a black aura of heaven in the natural furnace silently emerged in his palm. Is this the heavenly chi that can devour the luck of others? Musian sighed with emotion, and then soon noticed that Lin Ling's cheeks had turned red at some point, and couldn't help but hesitate. "Sister Lin Ling, are you okay? It stands to reason that after you gave me the heavenly chi, you should be free from the pain of the karmic fire burning your heart. Why do you still look so uncomfortable?" Lin Ling's pretty face was hot. She glanced at Musian, and whispered, I'm fine, it's just that the karmic fire and love poison backfired, and I need to meditate for a while." This time, Musian could clearly understand the meaning of Lin Ling's words, probably because he got the second heavenly chi. Lin Ling holds 3 heavenly chi, and now she has transferred 2 of them to Musian. In a sense, the 2 have signed a contract in the dark. Musian walked up to her and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Lin Ling subconsciously took a half step back. The moment she looked up at him, she retracted her gaze as if she had been electrocuted. She exhaled a burning breath and her cheeks became even more flushed. She tried her best to suppress the fire of karma, but when she smelled the scent of Musian, she almost couldn't control herself and pounced on him to seek pleasure. Lin Ling's legs were slightly together, and she couldn't help but rub her beautiful legs under her white long skirt. Her beautiful eyes were blurred and she shook her head gently. "No, it's okay, you just leave here first. I know that Sister Lin Ling has been suffering from the burning heart of the fire of karma in the past, but why does she look so bitter?" Musian hesitated for a moment and subconsciously glanced down at her. "You leave here first," she continued. Tips: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter report error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. When the fire of karma burned her heart, the effect of her words seemed to be reduced a lot. Musian could clearly feel that Lin Ling's words at this moment did not resonate with the world. "If you have anything, you can use this jade slip to call me back." Musian took out a special jade slip and placed it in front of Lin Ling, then took a last look and turned to leave the cave. Finally left. Lin Ling opened her eyes and looked at the figure of the boy leaving. She slowly breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She couldn't help but rubbed her legs gently, and then silently covered her hot face. No matter what, she must not be bitter. Lin Ling calmed down slightly, her thoughts gradually calmed down, holding her breath and concentrating, trying to let herself enter the state of meditation and cultivation. Outside Linglongdong Tianfu, Musian flew on his sword all the way, feeling emotional. This time, he not only obtained the energy of heaven, but also knew the identity of the chosen son hidden in the dark. For him, it was also a relief. It was already dusk when he left the cave. Musian came to Tianji Peak slowly with his sword and flew straight to the Dangzhen Palace near Tianji Peak. "It smells so good. Didn't Sister Fei Ying take a bath specifically for me?" Musian walked into the hall and immediately saw the charming Lan Fei Ying, who was already waiting for him in the hall. Lan Fei Ying rolled her eyes at him. "If my sister were here, would you still dare to speak like this?" Musian walked into the hall openly and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter even if it's senior sister, after all, it's not like senior sister doesn't know about my relationship with Sister Fei Ying. Has the chi of heaven been refined?" Lan Fei Ying's rosy little mouth opened slightly and she asked curiously. As the words fell, a dark ball of light appeared silently in the hall. Looking at the black ball of light in Musian's palm, Lan Fei Ying's beautiful eyes shone slightly, and she said softly, "Is this the aura of heaven from Senior Linglong? How is it going to swallow up my luck?" Musian said, "Maybe I have to be rude to Sister Fei Ying." Lan Fei Ying smiled coquettishly and said, "Have you done too many rude things to your sister?" She raised her eyes and glanced at Musian. Her long, snow-white legs under her cheongsam were crossed and she sat lazily holding her cheeks. "Whatever you want to do is up to you." Musian's heart palpitated slightly. If the situation wasn't right at this time, he really wanted to execute this woman right in the palace. He calmed down slightly, closed his eyes slightly, and controlled the aura of heaven to slowly float in front of Lan Feiying. The next moment, Lan Feiying felt that there seemed to be a suction force sucking her luck. Lan Feiying relaxed her body as much as possible and allowed the energy of heaven to slowly envelope her. After nearly half a quarter of an hour, Yu's destiny blessed by Lan Feiying's body had been completely absorbed by Musian's heavenly energy. At the same time, Musian soon heard the commotion coming from the personal interface. He lightly clicked on the personal interface and saw that behind the first seat, there were the second and third seats. The natural cauldron is filled with surging luck, bright as day. Sure enough, I can swallow up the destiny of heaven and use it for my own use. I can even use the destiny of heaven to open a seat in the heaven. Musian felt a bit of surprise in his heart. It must be said that he is indeed Yu. No wonder he has encountered several dangers in the past without being killed. With such great luck, it is impossible to die even if he jumps off a cliff and seeks death. Maybe it will turn out to be a blessing in disguise and discover the relics of an ancient power under the cliff. At this time, Lan Feiying snorted and looked at him teasingly. Don't just care about your own happiness. Shouldn't you reward your sister with something? Musian put his arms around her slender waist, leaned closer and said, I can't repay Sister Feiying for what she did, so I can only pledge myself to her. Lan Feiying gave him a charming look. Get lost. How many girls have you promised your body to? It's not worth anything at all. Lan Feiying changed one leg and raised it up. She wore a fiery red cheongsam that outlined her graceful and tight figure. A pair of elastic, long, snow-white legs were exposed under the skirt. Her plump thighs were just right, and her plain white skin was dazzling and charming under the candlelight. The feet are wearing a pair of slender high heels, tall and sexy. That charming face is dotted with light makeup, adding a bit of charm. Tonight I have an appointment with my sister to play chess. If she doesn't wait for me, she might come to me later. Seeing that Musian refused to let go, Lan Feiying teased charmingly, if you don't mind my sister misunderstanding our relationship, I don't care if you continue to stay here, or... She gently blew a breath of hot air into Musian's ear, be intimate with my sister here. Senior sister is also coming, Musian coughed and said, if you think about it carefully, I still have some things to deal with tonight. Now his relationship with his senior sister is heating up rapidly, but at the same time, his relationship with Lan Feiying has been very good since early. The senior sister doesn't know about this, so he still needs an opportunity for a sister to fall into his arms. After that, find a time to test the senior sister first. Musian thought about this, stood up and said, since Sister Feiying has something to do later, I will go back first. Lan Feiying licked her lips, looked at Musian with a half smile as she stood up to leave, and said, it seems like you care more about my sister than me. Sister, I'm so sad. I punched each monster. Musian's face was dark, and he suddenly turned around and walked over. Then, under the gaze of Lan Feiying's slowly widening beautiful eyes, he hugged her slender waist and lowered his head to kiss her rosy little mouth. Lan Feiying's beautiful eyes flickered slightly. Although her expression was calm, there was an unconcealable shyness hidden deep in her eyes, and her delicate body was slightly tense. After a while, Musian loosened his lips, looked at Lan Feiying's red face, and said with a smile, Sister Feiying, don't stare at me like that. After teasing me so many times, I have to get some interest back first. After saying that, Lan Feiying waved her hands and turned away without giving Lan Feiying a chance to have a fit. Lan Feiying watched Musian's leaving figure, her slender fingertips painted with red manicure lingering in front of her red lips, as if she was feeling the residual warmth of the kiss just now. After a long time, she suddenly withdrew her gaze and murmured in a low voice. Sister, if you don't take action, I won't worry about you anymore. Dexon Garden. Sister Lingxian deliberately ignored me during the alchemy competition these days, trying to catch me, but if I feel bad, She won't feel good either. This is a good time for revenge. Maybe I can see her, he. Musian flew to the villa where Ye Lingxian lived on his sword, feeling happy, and his previous depression was swept away. After he stepped into Dexon Garden, he went straight to Ye Lingxuan's room. He quietly opened the door, thinking that he would see Ye Lingxian, but he didn't see a single person in the villa. There is no one in this villa. Could it be that they all went to Daofeng to practice? Musian hesitated for a moment, and finally turned back to Tianhe Garden. It doesn't matter, I can find my Naxi and Mengru sisters. It just so happened that I took 2 stockings and an indescribable ball from Yaokai Holy Land a few days ago. I can play with them at night. After returning to Tianhe Garden, Musian soon saw the figures of several beauties in the pavilion. However, for some reason, Musian always felt that the atmosphere seemed a bit solemn and dangerous. Ordinarily, the matter with Sister Lingxian on the alchemy platform today should have come to an end. What happened to them? What are you doing here? Playing chess. Musian took the initiative to greet them and walked into the pavilion. The warm charcoal fire dispelled the chill of the winter night and illuminated the night, but for some reason, Musian had a bad feeling in his heart. Busy man, are you back? I thought you would stay overnight with some girl today. Yesiu laughed, swinging her ponytails, fearing that the world would not be in chaos. Musian looked at Wei Mengru calmly and asked, Sister Mengru, what happened? Did you just quarrel? Wei Mengru didn't say anything, but silently took out an invitation from her arms and handed it to Musian. Musian subconsciously glanced at Wei Mengru. What is this? The invitation to Senior Kingdi's wedding by Ruoxi said lightly. Ye Lingxian silently pressed the desolate time lock in her sleeve, signaling it not to act rashly for the time being. Musian laughed and said, Ruoxi, you like to joke again. How could Senior Kingdi send a wedding invitation? He suddenly froze for a moment, as if he remembered something, and his heart trembled slightly. His fingers trembled, and he glanced at the beauties under the pavilion, then slowly opened the invitation and took a look at the content of the invitation. It was indeed a wedding invitation. And the names of the bride and groom were also very familiar. The bride Yao Meng, and the groom Musian. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 389. On the Qing Emperor's wedding, he actually entertained the Kyushu monks in such a grand manner, and even sent invitations to Tianhe Garden. Did Mu Lang know about this before? Before Musian could wake up from the shock of receiving the wedding invitation, he heard a gentle and melodious voice coming from not far in front of him. Bai Ruoxi raised her delicate and beautiful face and stared directly at Musian, which also brought him back to reality from his previous thoughts. In fact, Musian knew about Kingdi's wedding. After all, Yao Meng had already discussed it with him before. It's just that he didn't expect that before he could find a suitable time to explain it to everyone, Yaokai Holy Land had already sent invitations to the wedding. And it was also sent to Tianhe Garden. Yao Meng's fishing act was so realistic that even I almost believed it. Musian looked at the wedding invitation in his hand silently, and then nodded calmly under the gaze of Bai Ruoxi's beautiful moist eyes. Actually, I wanted to explain this to you earlier. The Qing Emperor has touched the threshold of the Ascension realm. This kind of thing may not be noticed by the monks in Zhuzhou, but it is naturally impossible for the powerful people who are also in the same way to detect it. The southern wilderness and the western region were working secretly before. If they knew that the Qing Emperor, whom they had offended in the past, was about to reach the Ascension realm, they would probably do everything possible to stop it. But no matter who it is impossible for anyone to openly attack a Qing Emperor who has touched the Ascension realm, not to mention that she has already completed the Hedeo realm, and if she is in the Yaokai Holy Land, she will also have the blessing of the formation, making it difficult to hurt the origin. Only with such a grand wedding will the undercurrent under the water begin to surge. Emperor Qing had mentioned before that he and Musian were Taoist couples, so even if they got married, it would be a matter of course and no one would doubt them. However, it is precisely because no one doubts whether Qing Emperor really wants to get married that this creates such a difficult situation. The marriage is indeed true, Musian said. Whoosh! A golden chain flew out of Ya Lingxuan's cuffs and flew straight in the direction of Musian. At this time, another dark chain fell with the sound of the chain hitting, blocking the lock of desolate time. Calm down first. He's not the kind of person who would be so irrational. It's not too late to make plans after, he explains. From behind, a familiar cold voice came. Wei Mengru folded her arms and leaned against the stone pillars under the pavilion. Her goose-yellow dress revealed her alluring white shoulders. A thin ribbon was tied around her waist, highlighting her plump and straight breasts. The mark of the previous butterfly can no longer be seen on the tender white thighs under the skirt, because at this moment, the immortal devouring lock is entangled with the lock of desolate time. Sister Mengru. Musian called softly in emotion. Sure enough, I had not spoiled her in vain before, and Sister Mengru was still reliable at the critical moment. Ya Lingxuan's eyes flashed slightly, and then she said with a smile, "It's the lock of the desolate time that escaped by itself. It's none of my business. In fact, I naturally believe in Brother Mu. Yes, yes, Sister Lingxian knows how to feel sorry for Brother Mu best. The lock of Huangshi also has a crush on your Brother Mu, so she wants to tie me up." "I understand." Bairuoxi raised her soft and beautiful eyes. Her white skirt seemed to be dyed with a warm luster under the charcoal fire. Her curled eyelashes trembled softly and she stared at him softly. "Malang, are you really going to fight with Senior Kingdi, Mary?" Musian did not answer directly, but after pondering for a long time, he slowly said, "Kaios who has always been in peace, and although there are constant frictions between Dongzhou and the demon realm, there has never been a large-scale war since the demon realm queen took over. The reason for the dispute is because of the powerful existence of Hedao realm. This time Yao Meng has even touched the Tao of the feathering realm. Do you think there are people who hope that she will really break through the Hedao realm and break free from the shackles of heaven and earth?" Musian continued, "Of course it is impossible. When she was condensing her body in the past, at least 3 major forces in the 9 provinces did not want her to join the Tao, let alone now that she has reached the threshold of becoming a feather. Bairuoxi is an extremely smart beauty who knows everything." She immediately raised her clear beautiful eyes and asked, "Mulang means, that the Qing Emperor intends to use the name of the wedding to completely eliminate internal enemies and foreign troubles. The wedding in Yaokai also means that the future will be a place where storms gather. And a place with more people means more movement." Several people present were all very smart girls, so they naturally understood the meaning of Musian's words. However, at this time, Yesiu suddenly said, "So you married her just to fish out the forces that were secretly preparing to move? But what if the Qing Emperor really does the trick? Then you will really be a married man. If my brother-in-law finds out, he will have to twist your head off. If you keep talking, I will be separated by Ruoxi and the others now." Mu Jian was panicking, but his face was calm. "If nothing goes wrong, this wedding will be interrupted before then." "What if it's not interrupted?" Ye Lingxian suddenly asked. Musian. These words suddenly stopped him. It's not that he hasn't considered this issue, but what he has to consider now is not only the issue of Yao Meng's promotion to the Ascension realm. He has now obtained the 2nd and 3rd seats in the heaven. If these 2 seats are given to those around him in the future, the protagonists also have to face the situation of looking at each other. No one in Zhou would want to have a being who is superior to the world for no reason. As long as Yao Meng breaks through, someone will definitely stop him. If Yao Meng can really break through the Yahua realm in one fell swoop, the protagonists around him in the future will also have more protection. The Forbidden Area was born when the young master died, and it cleaned up the rotten forces in Dongzhou, but it is impossible to completely eliminate them. Wei Mengru said lightly, this marriage is a good opportunity. Last time when the Green Emperor condensed her body, she was secretly stopped by everyone. If she really intends to break through the Yehua realm, I am afraid she will face a great test, Ye Lingxian said softly. This statement is also a tacit agreement on the upcoming drama. Yes, it is indeed a big test, Musian sighed softly. Sensing by Ruoxi's dark eyes that seemed to want to lock him in the basement, he sighed again in his heart. Not only Yao Meng, but also a big test for me. But no matter what, the maid said so, and Bai Ruoxi didn't say anything, so this topic was left aside for the time being. I just got some insights into cultivation today. I'm going to meditate and practice first. Musian interrupted the delicate atmosphere at the right time. Originally, I was thinking about going back to Tianhe Garden tonight to find Naxi to soothe my tired heart, but it was obviously not appropriate to ask for this in the current situation. Besides, there are other girls watching here. Could it be that if I said, Ruoxi, I want to feel the greatness of human heart in your arms? I was locked up in the basement in a minute. Does Sister Ruoxi really agree with Qingdi's plan? Ye Lingxian looked at Musian's back, who returned to the house to meditate, and suddenly asked in a low voice. If Qingdi can really take this opportunity to advance to the Yehua realm, it will still be good for Mu Lang, Bai Ruoxi said softly. Ye Lingxuan's eyes flickered slightly, and suddenly asked, what if Qingdi really intends to take this opportunity to get married? Bai Ruoxi's beautiful face gradually lost expression, and the weak posture just now completely disappeared from her face. A rare hint of indifference was revealed on that beautiful and elegant face. Then, after just a few seconds, she regained her soft and lovely demeanor. Then we can only snatch the bride and bring Malang back to the Sword Palace. From the opening of the current territory of Zhuzhou to the present, it can be said that the history is ancient and long. Dongzhou is a land of talented people and a vast territory. Most of the monsters in the demon world are cultivated into humans. There are thousands of Buddhas in the western regions. Although there are few cultivators in the southern wilderness, the combat power of each evil god is amazing, and the cultivation system is completely different from other cultivators, forming its own lineage. In short, Zhuzhou has its own unique characteristics, and the few things in common are the topic of eating melons. Whether it is the people or the cultivators, they are inevitably interested in eating melons. From the past to the present, there are not a few beautiful things that people talk about when cultivators get married. It's just, the wedding of the first generation of the Saintess of Yaokai Holy Land, the dream lover of countless cultivators, and a cultivator of the refining spirit realm. This is the first time in history. In the future, when future generations read history and see the wedding of the Green Emperor, they will probably question the authenticity of this text. Because it is too weird, just hearing this news makes people feel unreal. In less than 3 days, the news gradually fermented in Dongzhou and then spread to all parts of Zhuzhou. At this moment, the 13 seats in the demon world are collectively confused. Even the first seat, who has been following the demon queen for many years in the past, is in a dazed state of I am superior, what did I hear? She looked at the demon ministers sitting on both sides of the long table with a dazed look in her eyes. At this point, the 13 seats in the demon world have naturally more or less noticed what the demon queen meant to Musian. After all, the queen went to the border for a little cultivator before retreating, and even got injured for him. How could they not notice such a big news? Now that the Green Emperor wants to get married, there are people from their demon world in Dongzhou, so of course they knew it at the first time. But now the queen of the demon world is in retreat, refining the essence of the first generation of the demon emperor, and no one dares to disturb her. But according to the words of the first seat, Musian means a lot to the queen. If the queen asks about this matter after half a year, how to explain it to her? The noble and beautiful fairy Yao Meng in everyone's eyes found that Musian was very good looking, and coupled with the grace of saving her life and many other complicated emotions, she announced that she would marry him in the Yaokai Holy Land half a year ago, and they also held a grand wedding and invited the cultivators of Juzhu to come. But your majesty, you can rest assured Master Musian lived a very happy life after marriage. He was taken back to Yaokai Holy Land and raped that night. He had sex with King Di every night. King Di changed his clothes every day to play erotic games with him. Now they have a little Musian, and the child can run on the ground. Your majesty, if you really like him so much, we will accompany you to invade Dongzhou and N.T.R him in front of King Di, and let their children call you mom. Although Musian may have completely become the shape that King Di likes at this time, he can't leave her. If this is said, it will test whether the Queen of the Demon Realm has a temporary feeling for Musian or loves him to death. The former may be laughed off, if it is the latter. As if they thought of some bad scenes at the same time, the ministers looked at each other for a moment, and then shuddered slowly. First seat, do you think this matter needs to be reported to Her Majesty? Finally, someone broke the strange silence and asked. Your Majesty has just been in seclusion for a short time. It would be too exaggerated to interrupt His Majesty's seclusion for a small cultivator from Dongzhou, not to mention whether it would lead to serious consequences. The third seat looked indifferent and said lightly, if Her Majesty gets angry, are there any of you willing to bear her anger? All the ministers were silent, and no one spoke for a while. But if according to what the first seat said before, if His Majesty really has feelings for him, or if Musian is part of His Majesty's plan, wouldn't it be a waste of her plan? Someone couldn't help but refute. The high-level officials of several major demon worlds looked at each other and said at the same time, then you go to wake up His Majesty. The demon cultivator immediately kept silent. At this time, the first seat suddenly sighed, forget it, let's observe it first. I always feel that things are not as simple as they seem. She said softly. Musian's Taoist partner is the palace master of the Sword Palace, and his sister Yelingxian is also the saint of the Forbidden Zone. The disciples of the Lianji sect's leader are also closely related to him, so why didn't they stop this wedding? Maybe the Green Emperor is planning something. After the first seat finished speaking, the 13 seats exchanged glances with each other, and soon nodded slightly, agreeing with the first seat's words. No matter whether the Green Emperor really wants to get married, if His Majesty wakes up in the future and finds that Musian has become a married man, anyway, we discussed it for a long time at the beginning, and in the end, for the good of the demon world, and there is no way to stop the Green Emperor from getting married, it is force majeure. With extremely subtle and lucky thoughts, the 13 seats of the demon world discussed for a while and finally came to a conclusion, wait and see. Anyway, just delay, and delay until His Majesty's retreat is over. 3 days later, late at night. Musian sat cross-legged on the soft couch, refining the spiritual energy in the natural furnace. If the spiritual energy given to him by Luo Tan is completely refined, and combined with the elixirs given by several sect leaders, he can at least be promoted by 2 grades in a short period of time. It's a pity that Luo Tan didn't have her body, otherwise if she was with her, well, maybe he could really break through the soul refining realm in one fell swoop. In Juzhu, there are many cultivators in the Qi refining and soul refining realms, but the number of return to void realm is pitifully small. Because the soul refining realm can still rely on one's own efforts to cultivate to this point, but the return to void realm in the future requires talent and luck. Both are indispensable. Refining the spiritual energy flowing in his body, Musian, who was originally at the bottleneck of the 5th level of soul refining, almost broke through in one fell swoop. And the spiritual energy given by Luo Tan also disappeared quietly. Before Musian had time to immerse himself in the joy of just breaking through the 5th level of soul refining, he suddenly caught a wisp of special spiritual energy that did not belong to this world in his cauldron. Strange, this aura is not from Juzhu, nor from Tiansheng Furnace, nor from the aura in the Heavenly Palace. When did I have such aura in my body? Musian hesitated for a moment, and his spiritual sense swept over his furnace. It was indeed a special aura that had never been there before. Where have I seen this aura before? Musian slowly opened his eyes, his brain spinning at high speed, and then, he seemed to think of something, and whispered to himself, "New Heavenly Deo." Yes, this is Yuan Luo's aura. He had seen Yuan Luo several times in the Heavenly Palace before, so he could naturally sense the special aura on her. The Heavenly Palace and the New Heavenly Deo are closely related to me, and Yao Men became the first seat of the Heavenly Palace, and merged with the New Heavenly Deo, so I also got the power of the Heavenly Palace. But the question is why after Yao Men merged with the New Heavenly Deo, my perception of the Heavenly Palace, and even my own strength, can become stronger. Musian could clearly perceive that he could now feel the existence of the Heavenly Palace without the help of the ring left by the first generation of demon kings. After a brief hesitation, he suddenly remembered something important, threw off the quilt, got out of bed, put on his coat, and summoned the Heavenly Questioning Lock. The Heavenly Questioning Lock turned into a short ruler and stopped at his feet. Musian drove the Heavenly Questioning Lock and turned into a stream of light and flew towards the direction of Lianji Peak. The cold wind blew in the middle of the night. There were few cultivators near Lianji Peak, and the rich spiritual energy was diffused outside the main peak. Musian searched in the ring for a long time and finally found a paper crane that the sect master's sister had secretly communicated with him before, and threw it into the depths of Lianji Peak. After a while, there was a faint golden glow outside Lianji Peak, and then the glow gradually dimmed. The formation arranged outside Lianji Peak converged silently. Musian immediately flew into Lianji Peak on his sword, passed through the front hall, passed through the vast main peak, and passed through one hall after another, and finally arrived at a quiet small garden on the back mountain of Lianji Peak. Flowers, plants, and trees are still in full bloom. A pink peach tree is planted in front of the rippling pond. A beautiful woman is sitting in the yard, looking at the chessboard on the table, holding a cup of hot tea in her hands. The black dress, matched with the thin ribbon around the waist, outlines the perfect graceful figure. Today, the clan leader's sister is still shrouded in mystery and elegance. Musian has been attracted to her since he entered the small garden in the back mountain, but he can't tell how old she is. I thought she was beautiful at first sight, but as soon as I looked away, I immediately forgot her face and could only remember how big her cup size was. It's really scary. Could it be that the sect master's sister also has the ability to charm? I actually had the urge to marry her home as my wife, even though I couldn't even remember what she looked like. Musian's mind flashed with thoughts, but he remained calm on the surface. Shang Yanfei smiled faintly and looked at Musian. "Why do you have time to come to me today? Now you are the fiancé of the Qing Emperor. If the chat between you and me under the dim moonlight gets out, I'm afraid your girlfriends will be angry, right?" Although the sect leader is a homebody, she seems to know everything that happens outside. Musian's heart trembled, and he raised his hand and bowed respectfully, saying, "I have some doubts when practicing today, so I'm sorry to visit you late at night." Shang Yanfei put down the teacup, held her cheek with her hand, stared at Musian with her clear and beautiful eyes, and smiled. "Tell me about it." She looked like a young woman who had just turned 30, but at first glance, she exuded a mature sexiness that a girl never had. However, when she looked more closely, her smile made Musian feel like his girlfriend, pure and beautiful, revealing the innocence of the world. Every time he looked at her, Musian felt that he saw different types of beauties, and he liked them all. Musian calmed down and said, "When I was practicing tonight, I suddenly thought about the three ways of heaven, earth, and man in Jizhu. The way of heaven governs the rules and order, and a few days ago it was even able to bring its own will to Jizhu. Where does its power come from, and what does it feel like to be in the state of harmony? You visited late at night for this." Shang Yanfei narrowed her eyes and said in a calm tone, "In a sense, the power of the way of heaven comes from the cultivators. To be precise, the more powerful beings who are in harmony with the way of heaven, the stronger the way of heaven is. Its real power comes from the powerful beings who are in harmony with the way of Jizhu. A cold and pleasant voice sounded in the small garden, like the sound of a clear spring, and like jade hitting a glass, crisp and pleasant. Sure enough. Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he felt his heartbeat speeding up uncontrollably. The power of the way of heaven comes from whether the powerful beings who are in harmony with the way of heaven are in harmony with it, and the same is true for the new way of heaven. Therefore, after Yao Meng merged with the new heavenly Dao, Yuan Luo, who was bound to heaven, became stronger, and he could feel the existence of heaven more accurately, and even let his spiritual consciousness enter heaven without the help of any magic weapon. You are now the 6th level of soul refining, right? Shang Yanfei asked. My disciple's cultivation speed is a bit slow, and now it is indeed the 6th level of soul refining, Musian replied. Shang Yanfei stared with her beautiful eyes and was silent for a long time. Do you have anything else? She suddenly asked. I want to stay at the sect master's sister's place overnight. Does it count? Musian said respectfully in his heart, no, for the time being. It was a lie to say that he had a lot of doubts to ask Shang Yanfei, but he knew that the other party would not answer even if he asked. It's late tonight, so I won't disturb the sect master's rest. After saying that, Musian was about to turn around and leave. Wait a minute. At this moment, a clear and elegant voice suddenly came from behind. The cold wind blew, and the black dress was tightly attached to her graceful figure. From Musian's perspective, he could vaguely see the perfect curve of her chest. Then, under Musian's gaze, Shang Yanfei stood up and walked to the front of the yard, raised her slender jade hand, raised her head, and picked up a peach blossom. She turned around and carefully pinned it on the black robe on his chest. She smiled and said, "Happy wedding." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 390. This sounds like congratulations to me, but why do I feel a little bit weird? Musian stared at the flawless and beautiful face of the sect master's sister and couldn't help but complain in his heart. He suspected that the elder sister of the sect master was trying to blame him, but because there was no evidence, he finally had to say goodbye at the right time and left Xiao Yuan. It is not advisable to stay in Lianji Peak for a long time. If you are seen by other disciples, there will inevitably be some gossip. After all, one of them already has a Taoist companion, and the other is the leader of the Liangyi sect. Having a late-night tryst, if someone with an intention sees it, it will inevitably become a rumor like the leader is partial to a certain disciple or something like that. Fortunately, senior sister is also in Lianji Peak, so even if there are rumors, Musian can still say that he went to see senior sister. In the dim night, Musian passed through several halls with his sword, then thought for a moment, then returned to a clean and elegant villa, and soon caught Lan Mulian in a small house. How come junior brother, a busy man like me, still has time to visit Lianji Peak tonight? I seem to have seen you going to see master just now. Just as Musian was about to knock on the door, a cold, arrogant voice came from inside the house. Lianji Peak is shrouded by formations all year round, making it difficult to set foot on it. I also want to take this opportunity to reminisce with my senior sister, Musian said. This was an indirect admission that he did have something to do with concubine Shang Yan, but it didn't sound so upright. I'm looking for the sect leader sister, but I haven't forgotten you, senior sister, otherwise, why would I come to find you? This is the meaning of Musian's words. After all, Lan Mulian has always lived in Lianji Peak, and often plays against the sister of the sect master who is fair and impartial and never likes to cheat. The two great beauties, the master and the apprentice, occasionally talk about Musian's affairs. Instead of waiting for Shang Yanfei to accidentally mention this matter when they play chess later, it would be better to take the initiative to find the senior sister. Can I come in? Seeing the silence in the room, Musian asked again, about to open the door. Wait a minute. Suddenly the voice rose a little higher, and there was a trace of panic in the cold voice. She was anxious, but why? Could she be doing something shameful? Musian was about to push the door open when he immediately heard a soft rustling sound coming from inside the house. Musian hesitated at first, then his eyes were dazed, and then he started thinking for a few seconds. Then, his eyes widened a bit as he thought of something. Musian remained calm and said oh, then walked to the window sill, held his breath for a while, stood on tiptoes and took a look. Snap! A shoe flew out of the room and hit Musian on the head. However, before Musian could take care of the pain, his eyes were involuntarily attracted to the scene inside the house. At this moment, the tall and cool beauty had just put on a loose white blouse, vaguely revealing her snow-white shoulders and jade neck. Her back was to Musian, and her hair was disheveled. Thin white clothes wrapped her delicate body, and Musian looked in from the windowsill and could vaguely see the plump curve of her buttocks. Probably because she was being stared at, her plump and slender white legs subconsciously closed together, her eyes pretending to be indifferent. Is there anything you want to say? It's very beautiful, I give it 10 points, Musian commented. If you can give 100 points. Lan Mulian glanced at him coldly. Junior brother is a married man, please respect yourself. Did you really receive the invitation from Liang Yifeng? When Musian heard this, he immediately smiled bitterly and said, actually, there is another hidden meaning in this matter. Lan Mulian hummed lightly, you go to the lobby and wait for me. I will go after I change my clothes. Senior sister's endurance is really strong. If Lingxian or Qian'er sister were caught in the scene by me, they would probably be so ashamed that they would like to hide in the cracks of the ground, but senior sister still looked calm. Musian nodded slightly, turned around and left. Room. Lan Mulian put a hand on his chest, walked to the windowsill and closed the window, then turned around and sat on the desk, took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Heartbeat increases uncontrollably. She glanced at the bronze mirror on the dressing table, and a beautiful face was revealed in the mirror. There were still 2 blushes on her face that had not faded away, which was really tempting. Musian waited in the hall for nearly half a quarter of an hour before he saw the tall, cold beauty walking into the hall. The blue color is spread like a waterfall, slightly lazy and messy, and the moon-white dress brings out just the right proportions of the body. Lan Mulian glanced at Musian, raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly, and hummed softly, Master is tolerant of you, and he will let you in. It stands to reason that with concubine Shangyan's identity, the disciples of the sect would not be able to meet her directly under normal circumstances. That is to say, concubine Shangyan mistakenly accepted a paper crane from Musian, which caused what happened later. Senior sister seems to like her teacher very much, Musian said with a smile. Lan Mulian said calmly, who in this world doesn't respect master? Only junior brother will still send messages to hers he even when he knows her identity. Hearing this, Musian couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. At first, I just thought that the person who conveyed the message to my paper crane was my senior sister. Who would have thought that one day I would suddenly find out that she had become the sect leader? But speaking of the sect leader, I remember that Sister Lingxian seemed to have mentioned her many times before. Musian continued. When Ye Lingxian was a little girl, she followed the master of the restricted area to visit concubine Shangyan, so she had always been in love with that master since she was a child. Nowadays, Ye Lingxuan's elegance and calmness are more influenced by the sect master. Lan Mulian smiled brightly, I don't think there is anyone in this world who doesn't like her. In the world today, there is only one concubine Shangyan who can be as beautiful as the Qing emperor. But soon, she quickly stopped her smile and glanced at him, but I have to remind you, don't make any plans against master. If you plot against her, you will find in the end that even your plot against her is also controlled by master. The result she led. The fact that senior sister is willing to tell me this shows that she regards me as one of her own, and I am really good at licking her. Musian nodded slightly. Among Lianyi Peak, the only person I like is senior sister. What I'm talking about is not a question of like or dislike. Lan Mulian glanced at Musian, tapped the table with her fingertips, and said calmly, "Anyway, just remember my reminder." Seeing Musian nodding sincerely, Lan Mulian showed a faint smile. In fact, she had something that she had been wondering about for a long time, but she had never mentioned it to anyone. There are many formations in Lianji Peak, most of which were arranged by concubine Shangyan when she had nothing to do. When the paper crane she rode was able to fly out of Lianji Peak and even fly to Tianqian City, it was natural that concubine Shangyan obtained it. Default. The traps set by others have always been set by Shang Yanfei under the guidance of the other party. A being who can spy on the secrets of the world without even being counterattacked will really accept the paper crane sent by his junior brother accidentally, and even interact with the other party without knowing it. Did he write to each other for such a long time? Lan Mulian suddenly remembered something important, and the curvature of the corners of his mouth gradually converged. Then, his beautiful eyes as clear as a cold pool became a little colder. Speaking of which, junior brother is about to get married. Should I prepare some gifts for you? Congratulations. Junior brother's wedding. Here, senior sister finally couldn't help it anymore. Musian had already thought of the reason and said, "Senior sister, and I told you earlier that although it was a marriage on the surface, in fact dash." Before he finished speaking, Lan Mulian said, "Actually, it is to achieve certain goals, such as fishing." Senior sister is indeed very smart and can guess everything, Musian said. When did senior sister know about it? With your temperament, how can you get married so peacefully? Lan Mulian chuckled softly, "If we really get married, I'm afraid the first one who can't sit still will be junior sister Bai. Of course, if the fish never surfaced, it would not be difficult to guarantee whether Qing Emperor would take advantage of the situation and really get married." With the witness of the Kyushu monks, she added. Musian immediately said, "Sister, please don't worry about this, I have my own sense of discretion." Ahem, by the way, I haven't congratulated senior sister for winning the competition in this Immortal Ascension conference. This was obviously changing the subject because the situation was not going well. It was really blunt. Lan Mulian curled her lips and said calmly, "There is no one else who has returned to the Void Realm except me in this Ascension conference. It doesn't matter if I win. It's you. Do you still remember the promise you made before?" Lan Mulian glanced at him, her pink lips suddenly curved into a beautiful curve, and her voice changed. "In this Ascension conference, the 3 Emperor-level medicinal herbs are the obvious rewards, but secretly, there are others another reward. If I remember correctly, you also acquiesced to that condition back then." At the end of her speech, she took out a talisman from her sleeve. Musian glanced at it subconsciously and hesitated. "What is this?" Lan Mulian showed an ice-breaking smile. "No matter where you are, as long as you burn this talisman, you can be teleported back to this place." Musian's heart skipped a beat and he asked in surprise, "Is there such a talisman in this world? Could it be that the sect leader also made it? Master is the only one in the world who is proficient in the way of the 9 peaks and can suppress the formation in a talisman." Lan Mulian tucks her hair behind her back and looks at him with a half-smile. "There is a very secret little black room in my villa. Master said that she used to study formations and invent various strange things, a place with weird props, but it's abandoned now." Lan Mulian turned to look at him and smiled sweetly. "It suits you very well. Don't say such heartless words with such a touching smile, okay? Senior sister looks cold and arrogant, but actually her heart is dark." Musian coughed to cover up his embarrassment and panic, and said, "Sister, you are joking. With the relationship between you and me, if you tell me anything, I will come. There is no need to use that kind of talisman." Lan Mulian glanced at him meaningfully. I hope so. It is impossible to shut down the small dark room, not in this life. Near morning, Musian dragged his exhausted body back to Tianhe Garden. Fortunately, we are now in the realm of refining the gods. As long as we meditate for a while, our physical fatigue can be recovered. Moreover, there has been no food delivery in the past few days, and the spiritual energy in the natural furnace is gradually recovering. Musian sat cross-legged on the soft couch and meditated. After half an hour, he opened his eyes, stretched out his palm, and the Wenchen lock appeared in his palm. The current weapon spirit seems to be because Musian received a trace of spiritual energy from the new Tiandeo. A few days ago, it was still unable to be refined by Musian, but now he can feel the spirit in the Wenchen lock. Contained weapon spirit. It's a pity that this heaven-asking lock is still lacking something. If I can completely control it, I can save myself if I am really locked up in a small dark room by my senior sister in the future. Musian sighed softly. At this moment, a soft and crisp voice suddenly came from his heart. When I found this heaven-asking lock in the heavenly court in the past, it had already lost some of its divinity. Although the Teishu ancient mine repaired its surface, the spirit of the weapon was damaged after all. If my guess is correct, it may have been the magic weapon of the Lord of the Heavenly Court in the past. Musian was stunned, surprised, and happy. Sister yet? How did you wake up? Could it be that the seal of the pure world green lotus has been unlocked? Ye Qingxin sat in the void of the Tiansheng furnace. Her skin was as white as cream, her feet were bare, and there seemed to be strands of flame scattered from her body. The black and red interwoven skirt further highlights the crystal clearness of her jade feet. She snorted coldly. Although the pure world green lotus is overbearing, the Green Emperor dare not completely seal your Tiansheng furnace cauldron. After all, she wants to practice dual cultivation with you. And it is only a matter of time to unlock the little seal she left behind. But when the Green Emperor is alive, the seal of the pure world green lotus will absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth and solidify the seal when it weakens. Musian hesitated and said, Then how did you unlock the seal? In the Tiansheng furnace cauldron, a figure like a fairy in fire appeared silently in the room. Her dress outlined her tall figure, with curves, and a stunning appearance. A faint smile flashed across Ye Qingxin's beautiful eyes. The formation in Lianji Peak isolates everything from the outside world, and I can constantly nurture my spiritual consciousness in your natural furnace, so I can use this to unlock the seal of the pure world green lotus. Musian thought that the sect leader's sister liked to tinker with formations, and the formations in Lianji Peak were even more dense. It was no wonder that once I entered Lianji Peak, even the pure world green lotus left by the Green Emperor in the natural furnace could not absorb spiritual energy. But think about it this way, if the senior sister used that talisman to teleport me to Lianji Peak silently, wouldn't no one be able to find me? The senior sister is in the return to void realm, and her strength is proportional to her chest, unfathomable. If I really locked her up in a small dark room. Hiss, Musian suddenly took a breath of cold air. Seeing that Musian looked a little off and worried, Ye Qingxin asked, What's wrong? Musian waved his hands in exhaustion. Nothing, I'm just thinking about my future. What exactly is the divinity that Sister Ye mentioned earlier? He asked again. Ye Qingxin knew that this guy was trying to change the subject, but she didn't pursue it. Although she hadn't been back to heaven for a while, staying in the Tiansheng furnace was no different from staying in heaven, and the spiritual energy was even richer than that of heaven. This ancestor of the Ye family was now enjoying himself. She suddenly realized the happiness of the Green Emperor. If you want to marry him, then marry him. On the wedding day, when you are seeing off the guests outside, the child in the bridal chamber will be mine. Ye Qingxin's charming red eyes held a faint smile, staring at Musian, and said, If my judgment is correct, the questioning heaven lock should have possessed divinity, but it was damaged for some reason. Although the spirit of the weapon is still there, it lacks divinity. If you take good care of it in the future, you may be able to give birth to new divinity. The divinity of the questioning heaven lock. Musian repeated it and said to himself, the questioning heaven lock may have been the magic weapon of the Lord of the Heavenly Court, and I am the one who modified the rules of the Heavenly Court. Therefore, the questioning heaven lock had reacted to me before, and even never resisted me. Maybe it was out of instinct. If it can be given divinity, the questioning heaven lock may become a true ancestral weapon. Musian looked at the questioning heaven lock in his hand, which had turned into a long sword, and his eyes flickered slightly. He seemed to remember something and mobilized the cauldron in his body. A wisp of spiritual energy quietly floated out of the cauldron, emitting a faint colorful glow. A wisp of spiritual energy from the new heavenly Dao. This was a wisp of spiritual energy that Yao Meng obtained after he merged with the new heavenly Dao. It was extremely rich and difficult to describe in words. If this spiritual energy is used to warm the heavenly questioning lock, maybe it will work. A wisp of spiritual energy from the new heavenly Dao quietly wrapped around the heavenly questioning lock, and at this moment, a magical scene happened. The rusty surface of the heavenly questioning lock seemed to be moisturized like a dry leaf, and for a moment it emitted a faint glow. Then, it seemed to come alive, and its shape was also changing. Ye Qingxin's eyes were filled with surprise. The spiritual energy you injected into it earlier has taken effect, and it has indeed been nurtured. It seems that this magic weapon in the heaven needs the spiritual energy of the new heaven to be nurtured. Musian murmured to himself, but why did it become a ruler? Ye Qingxin frowned and said softly, it depends on your personality. After all, this heaven-asking lock can be transformed into any weapon. In the past, the weapon that best suited my personality was a sword, so it transformed into the form of a sword. If I use this magic weapon in the form of a sword, I can exert all its current power. Now it seems that your personality is related to the ruler. When he said this, even Ye Qingxin's eyes were a little more doubtful, and he looked at Musian strangely. A ruler, in a sense, represents fairness and justice. Being able to transform into this shape means that Musian is towards the light, is fair and just in his life and work, and will not bend the law for personal gain. Well, although he is a good boy, I think it has nothing to do with fairness and justice. Under Ye Qingxin's subtle gaze, Musian silently stared at the heaven-asking lock in his hand and whispered to himself, the ruler is the standard for measuring all things in the world. According to legend, the two ends of the ruler, one symbolizes the sky, and the other symbolizes the earth. In this case, let's call it the heaven-associated ruler from now on. The heaven-associated ruler exuded a faint colorful glow, as if it was very satisfied with Musian's name. Ye Qingxin's beautiful eyes flickered, and she couldn't help but chuckled, if you really get married successfully in the future, I'm afraid your Taoist partner will be angry. If they lock you up in a small dark room, you can just find a way to use this thing to get out of trouble. Musian was stunned, then smiled, and waved his hand and said, not really, Ruoxi and the others won't go that far. No one knows them better than me. Besides, I am the author of the rules of the heavenly court. Now I have the help of Ye Qingxin and the original witch, two powerful spiritual consciousnesses in my body. I can suppress Naxi Lingxian with just a wave of my hand. If it doesn't work, I'll just hide in the heavenly court. Could it be that they can chase me in the heavenly court and stuff the indescribable ball into me, and give me the famous scene of the sealed Musian? Ha! Musian raised a frivolous arc at the corner of his mouth and put away the measuring ruler. Ye Qingxin stared at him silently, and suddenly asked, when do you plan to leave for the Yaokai Holy Land? Musian pondered for a moment and said, maybe half a month later. During this time, I will try to impact the 7th level of soul refining. If it is normal practice, even with the blessing of the energy of heaven, it is impossible to advance so quickly. But the pills in Musian's ring are enough for him to advance one level in a short time. This is eating free rice, oh no, this is the benefit of licking the jade legs of the Green Emperor's sister. These pills are the gifts sent by the chief elders of the sect before, and even many ancient families. The total number is too numerous to count. Just taking these pills is enough for him to advance. Ye Qingxin nodded slightly. In that case, I will go back to the Tiansheng furnace to recuperate first. Musian hesitated for a moment, looked at her beautiful back, and said, today's meditation and cultivation consumes a lot of energy, and I may need to rest for a night. Sister Ye, can you accompany me? Ye Qingxin's eyebrows revealed a faint smile, and her beautiful eyes glanced at her. Just accompany you? Musian nodded immediately. I swear by the way of heaven, it's really just to accompany me, I'm so lonely alone. After an incense stick. Musian hugged Ye Qingxin's slender waist with both hands, buried his face in her hair, smelled the delicate fragrance of this beautiful ancestor of the Ye family, and the red gold flame that seemed to jump between her hair. As expected of a beautiful ancestor who is quite similar to Sister Qingdi, Yao Meng is a fairy who does not eat fireworks of the world, and Ye Qingxin is a beautiful and charming fire elf. Perfect, Musian sighed in his heart. Is this what you mean by just accompanying you? Ye Qingxin said quietly, with her back to Musian, her black and red dress slightly messy because of the previous movement, revealing her delicate collarbone. Because meditation is tiring when I think about it carefully, lying down and resting occasionally is also conducive to mental recovery. Don't worry, Sister Ye, I'll just hug you, I won't do anything, Musian said. Ye Qingxin slightly turned her body and gave Musian a very beautiful eye roll. Although I know your feelings, don't think about doing anything more excessive before the relationship between you and me is confirmed. Well, to put it bluntly, it's okay to be a little ambiguous, but not a bit shy. Musian was not annoyed, and hugged Ye Qingxin to sleep contentedly. After all, this beautiful ancestor was extremely disgusted with him at the beginning, but now he still went to bed with him. Women still need to be coaxed, and licking more these days will always soften her heart. After all, they are all in their own natural furnace, can they still run away? Musian is enjoying the soft jade of the beautiful ancestor of the Ye family, and at this moment, the Holy King city near the Yaokai Holy Land has begun to be arranged under the order of the Green Emperor. These days, cultivators from Dongzhou have gone to investigate the truth one after another, and it seems hard to believe such a truth. But no matter how they doubt, a grand wedding is gradually being prepared and brewing. Countless eyes are staring at the scene from all sides of Zhuzhou. The Green Emperor touched the threshold of immortality a few days ago. This news is extremely concerned by the great masters of Hedao. If there is really an immortal master in Dongzhou, no one knows what the current situation of Zhuzhou will evolve into. No matter whether the Green Emperor intends to or not, no one wants an immortal existence that is superior to them to appear. Although they don't know, even if the Green Emperor really immortalizes, he has no interest in ruling Zhuzhou. Compared with this kind of thing, it is more interesting to practice dual cultivation with Musian. But no matter what, after the news of the Qing Emperor's wedding spread throughout Zhuzhou, the entire Zhuzhou was in an uproar. Many people sent people from all sides to Dongzhou. No one knows whether the news that the Qing Emperor has reached the Yehua realm is true or false. After all, when the Qing Emperor reaches the threshold of Yehua, the shackles of heaven and earth are imposed on him, and his aura is fleeting, which even the great masters of Hedao cannot easily judge. For this reason, this grand wedding is the best opportunity to contact the Qing Emperor. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 391. Half a month later. Musian buried his face in Naxi's arms. In the early morning when he was a little short of breath, he opened his eyes and saw Miss Bai sleeping soundly. Her hair was scattered on her shoulders in a messy manner, her beautiful eyebrows were slightly relaxed, and her hands in the quilt were tightly hugging Musian's head. Her originally slightly weak white skin seemed to be stained with a healthy rosy luster. Last night, Byruoxi was like a flower. She was already weak and not good at fighting with others. She experienced the beating of the rain like a storm, and now she looked even more pitiful. But if you use your spiritual sense to scan her body, you will find that the spiritual energy in her cauldron is obviously much richer than half a month ago, just like a sapling being moistened by rain. In addition to her past pitiful and weak temperament, the beautiful by now exudes a mature sexiness that a girl never had. Under the bed, the pair of small and exquisite embroidered shoes fell casually on the ground, next to a pair of white short socks and a white palace skirt. Musian quietly left Byruoxi's arms, changed his clothes rustlingly, then looked at the girl who seemed to be sleeping due to exhaustion, covered her with a quilt, and covered the beautiful scene under the quilt. She seems to be about to refine her spirit and return to the void. Last night, Gong Lianyu's spiritual consciousness showed signs of awakening, but it seemed that she knew that you and Byruoxi were intimate, so she was embarrassed to show up. Yeking's soft and gentle voice came from the body. Musian's heart moved, and he closed the door and said, "So she can feel when Ruoxi and I are intimate." Yeking's lazily swung her crystal jade feet under her black and red long skirt, lowered her eyes slightly, and smiled faintly. Of course, Gong Lianyu's spiritual consciousness is in Byruoxi's cauldron. Even if she is asleep, how could she not feel the overwhelming spiritual energy of the heavenly court? So, my dual cultivation with Ruoxi also indirectly let Gong Lianyu experience it. Musian put his hand on his chin and pondered, but she never mentioned it. It seems that she is embarrassed. Gong Lianyu founded the Sword Palace in the past and swept away all enemies in the world. It is not an exaggeration to say that she has experienced more things than Musian. After all, in terms of lifespan alone, Gong Lianyu is thousands of times that of Musian. Musian is no different from a child in front of her. But in the past, Gong Lianyu used the sword as her way and was an absolute sword fanatic. No matter how much experience she had, she was still a novice in terms of emotions. If Gong Lianyu could really notice that I was intimate with Ruoxi and felt embarrassed because of it, then even if Ruoxi returned to the void after refining her spirit and awakened Gong Lianyu's spiritual consciousness, I would be sure that I could drive a big car. Musian stared at the pond in the villa in a daze, thinking to himself. Yeking's flew out of the natural furnace, and there seemed to be sparks scattered on her body. Her originally white and flawless skin was stained with fire, sacred and noble. There is less than half a month left before the wedding. "Are you nervous?" Yeking's suddenly asked. Musian shrugged and said, "Why should we be nervous? It's not a real marriage, so it's nothing." Yeking's said meaningfully, "I'm afraid someone will take this opportunity to get married. Besides, if the Green Emperor really breaks the shackles of heaven and earth and ascends to heaven, I don't know what he will do." Musian smiled and said, "Anyway, she should not be interested in ruling the entire Juzhu." Yeking's snorted coldly, "She may not be interested in Juzhu, but she may not be uninterested in everything. If she had known that so many things would happen in the lower world, she would not have been so conservative and directly let her own body descend to Juzhu. I thought that a wisp of spiritual consciousness was enough in Juzhu. After all, in Juzhu where the Dao is not obvious, a wisp of spiritual consciousness is enough for her to investigate the Lord of Heaven. And the fact proves that it is enough to investigate the Lord of Heaven, but if you want to compete for something, it is not enough." However, no one would have thought that Musian would have 4 or 5 great masters who could achieve the state of harmony. Even though most of them have not yet reached that state, since they are the reincarnations of great masters, it is only a matter of time before they can achieve harmony. Musian stared at the stunning beauty in front of him, and suddenly said, "Sister Ye doesn't want Yao Meng to break the shackles of heaven and earth and ascend to heaven." "Of course." Yeking's glanced at him and said lightly, "Do you think anyone would want a human emperor who is above the Hedao to appear in Juzhu? If Kingdi breaks through the shackles of heaven and earth one day and enters the realm of Yahweh, the current situation in Juzhu will be broken. No one, whether it is me or the people you know around you, will hope that she can ascend to heaven. Even if Kingdi uses this wedding to eliminate internal hidden dangers, when she ascends to heaven, she will also be obstructed by many people in secret. You are the future son-in-law of the restricted area, but even the master of the restricted area cannot help Kingdi, and the same is true for Lianji section. You should know this. Musian was silent for a while. He is not a fool, so he naturally knows what Yekingzin means. Most people don't want to see the situation in Juzhu broken because of Kingdi, even if she shows that she has no intention of ruling Juzhu. Even swearing is useless. The Yahweh realm is the human emperor. At this level, his existence itself is above the oath, and even the heavenly Deo will be wary of him. What about you? Musian asked. Sister Ye doesn't want her to become an immortal and ascend to heaven. Yekingzin glanced at Musian and said calmly, that's natural. Who would want their enemy to become immortal and ascend? She suddenly paused and raised her white chin slightly. Looking at Musian's silent expression, her red lips curved in a coquettish way, but if she plans to ascend to the throne and be promoted to the human emperor, I will still choose to be willing to help her. Musian was stunned and looked at the fiery red figure. Why? I don't like Kingdi because in a sense she is my enemy. Yekingzin gently held Musian's face with both hands, staring at him with her beautiful ruby clear eyes, and her soft and fragrant breath gently blew on his face. She showed a bright smile, but if it is your wish to let the Qing Emperor ascend to heaven, I am willing to protect her secretly from now on. Musian stared at those charming eyes and remained silent for an unknown length of time. Then he put his arms around her plump waist and hugged this plump and enchanting woman fiercely, as if he wanted to do this way to feel the temperature of her body more intimately. It's really uncomfortable for my sister to tease people but not give them back, Musian sighed softly. Yekingzin looked at him with a half smile, pushed him away gently, folded her hands across her chest, and deliberately raised her breasts, which were no less plump than Naxi's, and said calmly, if you have enough strength, you can force my sister to on the bed. Anyway, you have suppressed more than one powerful person in the Hedeo realm. If you can do it, I don't mind. Musian took a few glances at this huge human heart and wished he could take her into the house and give her a lesson. However, when he saw that the sparks surrounding Yekingzin had turned into countless fiery star butterflies, which contained terrifying spiritual energy, he immediately restrained his thoughts. Thank you, he said very seriously. Yekingzin looked at Musian playfully, raised his hand and waved away the flaming star butterflies around him, stepped closer, leaned on his shoulder, and turned his head slightly to look at Musian's profile. A charming smile appeared on his face. If you want to repay your gratitude, then from now on, you can take the place of Qing Emperor and make it up to your sister. Musian glanced at her depressedly, then you should let me make it up to you. I'll give you as much spiritual energy as you want. Yekingzin raised her slender, white, and delicate hands and gently stroked Musian's face. Just like a big sister teasing an inexperienced child, her beautiful eyes were filled with a joking smile. Don't worry, I will make up for it with you later. On top of Qing Emperor's wedding. So, do these people all like the elements of N.T.R? Musian launched his flying sword and headed towards the south bank, but Yekingzin's previously sultry and charming voice still echoed in his mind, and his mouth felt a little dry even now. Although he had known for a long time that this beautiful ancestor of the Ye family was not as fairy-like as she appeared, and even liked to play with people's hearts from time to time, he still did not expect that he, a veteran who has been wandering among flowers all year round, would fall into her hands. Don't let the future fall into my hands, otherwise I will have to use Wenchenshuo to give Sister Ye a special set meal. At this time, the props in Yao Meng's little dark room will be very useful. After all, she left 3 seeds of the purifying vine in the room. Although they were only used to play fun games, The effect was not as good as the real purifying vine, but it was enough. First put on a 3-point dress, then put on fishnet stockings, and finally sacrifice the jingxi seed and let it turn into vines all over the small black room. Mr. Mew, if you don't come here, I will think that you have forgotten about your upcoming wedding. Muzian was floating in front of a hall on the south bank when he suddenly heard a soft and melodious voice coming from not far ahead. As soon as he lowered his head, he saw the holy maiden of the southern wilderness waiting outside the hall. She was standing in front of the main hall at the moment, wearing a pale golden dress that was very different from usual. Her blonde hair was spread on her back, revealing her round and attractive shoulders. There was a light-colored thin ribbon tied around her waist, which tied her growth scale. The breasts are just right, making them round and tall. The cold wind blew, and the golden dress fluttered, vaguely revealing the plump and slender legs under the skirt, with a pair of high boots under her feet. Regina, have you spoken to your elders and the Holy Sun in the southern wilderness? Muzian jumped down from the flying sword and said with a smile. Elder, I did say that I would be away for a while. As for the Holy Sun. Regina glanced at him and said with a smile, he has nothing to do with me, what should I say to him? Nagiadi likes you very much, Muzian said with a smile. Regina crossed her arms across her chest, frowned slightly, and said calmly, there are many people who like me, so what does he mean? Although she is the Holy Sun of the southern wilderness, Regina is already much higher than Nagiadi in terms of status. After all, she is one person below 10,000 people in the southern wilderness. Among the three pillar gods, except for the god of the sky, the status of the other two pillar gods is not even as high as hers. Muzian looked at this sickly-looking little beauty for a few times, with a faint smile in his eyes, then get ready, today you and I will go to the Yaokai Holy Land. Regina glanced at Muzian with complicated eyes and showed a beautiful smile, I always feel that you are framing me. Your wedding to Emperor Qing was held at Yaokai Holy Land. The destination for you and me this time is Yaokai Holy Land. Is it possible that we have to complete the transaction under her nose? It's not impossible, Muzian spread his hands and said, I know your concerns, but this time I asked Miss Regina to go to Yaokai with me, not just for the transaction. Sure enough, Regina didn't seem surprised, narrowed her beautiful eyes, if I remember correctly, Mr. Mew and I have only done 2 transactions. Now you want to use me for no reason. Muzian shook his head and smiled, it's not use, but mutual benefit. If you have to say it, this matter is related to you and the entire southern wilderness. Regina hugged her chest with both hands, stepped on high boots and walked over, raised her eyes with a smile and looked at Muzian, Mr. Mew, why don't you tell me first? Based on your answer, I will decide whether to go with you this time. Do you know the name of the 4th pillar god? Muzian asked. Of course. Regina's eyebrows revealed a trace of doubt, why did you suddenly mention the god of space? It seems that you really don't know. Muzian said meaningfully, the god of space, Shui, cast a spell to create a body before leaving the southern wilds to seek a way to ascend to immortality. She made an agreement with the 3 pillars of God that she would be reborn with this body at a suitable time in the future. I can swear on this matter. If I say anything to deceive you, I will be struck by lightning. Regina was stunned at first, then her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and thoughts flashed in her mind. At that time, the god of space disappeared for no reason, and the god of sky was the only one left in the Hedeo realm of the southern wilds. The 2 gods of the earth and the sea were about to die, so they had to cut off their own deo, and their realms fell to enlightenment. They retreated in the depths of the southern wilds to cultivate emperor-level medicinal materials and extend their lifespans. As for the fact that the god of space Shui left, many people in the southern wilds actually knew that she was seeking a way to ascend to immortality. However, she was not aware that Shui had left a body behind before she left. Thinking of the treatment of the 3 pillar gods of the southern wilds and the respect shown to her by the elders in the southern wilds, Regina's eyes flickered slightly, and she had already thought of something. How do you know this? She stared into Musian's eyes. Shui Yi was trapped in the depths of the abyss in the past. I met her once. She asked me to help find the body she left behind, hoping to occupy that body for her own use and be reborn. Musian emphasized the word occupy. And that body, now in the southern wilds, naturally has a very high status. When he said the last word, he gave Regina time to digest this large amount of information. I believe that at this point, anyone who is not stupid can understand what he means. Why did you choose to help me instead of Shui Yi? After a long silence, Regina raised her golden eyes and stared into Musian's eyes. If you tell her that the person she is looking for is now in Lianji sect, she will owe you a favor in the future. She is an out-and-out bad woman. If I help her, I will have to sacrifice myself sooner or later. Musian stared at the frail little beauty in front of him and smiled. What do you think? Regina was stunned at first, her eyes flickered slightly, and she thought for a long time. Then, a charming smile appeared on her face. I will go to Yaokai with you. Lianji Peak. Lan Feiying wore a fiery red cheongsam, outlining her sexy and tight figure. She sat with her plump legs crossed, holding her cheeks with her hands, looking at the black and white chess pieces on the table, thinking about the next move. Sister, Musian will be a married man in half a month. Are you really not going to do anything, or stop him? Lan Feiying asked. Opposite the seat, sat a beautiful woman, wearing a moon-white long skirt and a fluffy snow-white coat, light and elegant, as bright and cold as ice and snow. Lan Murian looked calm, twisting a chess piece with her green jade fingers, and said calmly, if he really gets married, the one who should be anxious is Bairuoxi. There is something strange in this matter. The Green Emperor has set up many schemes, which outsiders cannot see. Since you and him are good friends, you should know it. Lan Feiying's face bloomed with a charming smile. Of course I know, but I want to ask what sister thinks of him. You have known him since Tianqian City, and you have never expressed any feelings for him for so long. Could it be that sister is really the Nine Heavens mysterious girl as people say outside, and will not be moved? Lan Murian's beautiful eyes turned sideways and glanced at her sister. He is my junior brother, at best a junior brother with a very good relationship. Why does he change in your mouth? It should be said that she is worthy of being a natural beauty. Even a glance seems to have all kinds of charm, adding a bit of charm to the coldness. You came to me today, playing chess is only one aspect, but you actually want to ask me this? Lan Murian asked. Lan Feiying's charming face showed a meaningful smile. According to what my sister just said, you don't have that intention towards Musian. The hall fell into a brief silence. What if I say that I hope my sister will give him to me in the future? Lan Feiying suddenly said again. She stared at her elegant and cold sister, and seeing that Lan Murian was still silent, she stood up and stretched her waist lazily. I lost this game of chess. Since my sister tacitly agreed to this, I will go back first. Lan Feiying was about to walk out of the hall with sexy steps. At this moment, a cold and pleasant voice suddenly came from behind. No. Lan Feiying paused for a moment, raised her red lips in a sexy arc, and walked away. I didn't expect that Tianqian Looting is about to get married. Don't you plan to stop it? If you become a Taoist partner with him, your realm can be improved by at least 30% faster than it is now. When flying away from Lianji Peak, Lan Feiying's heart also heard a gentle and elegant voice. Shui Yi's voice. Lan Feiying chuckled, there are enough girls around him. If I become a Taoist partner with him now, I will only be dragged into the center of the vortex. In the future, when he is tired of quarreling with the girls around him, he will naturally miss the good of me as a sister. Sometimes, men like this kind of distance. After a pause, Lan Feiying continued, as for your missing spiritual consciousness, don't worry, I will find a way to warm it for you and find the saint of Nanhuang. Shui heard this and fell silent. And Lan Feiying showed a cold smile on her face. She could naturally see Shui's thoughts. On the surface, he was doing good for her, but in fact, he coveted Musian's body and even hoped to use him to nurture his own spiritual consciousness. Now there are enough little bitches, and there can't be more. In the 473rd year of the Dagon dynasty, Yao Meng, the first-generation saint of Yaoqi Holy Land, will hold a grand wedding in Shenhuang City. This news caused a sensation in Zhuzhou. A few days ago, Yaoqi Holy Land had a strange phenomenon, and the shackles of heaven and earth fell on Yaoqi. The Green Emperor seemed to have touched the threshold of Yahua realm. But after that, there was no more strange phenomenon, and the next day, the Green Emperor sent out wedding invitations to invite all the ancient families to attend the wedding. Whether it was to find out whether the Green Emperor really ascended to Yahua, or to take this opportunity to make friends with Yaoqi, this was an excellent opportunity. So from half a month ago, ancient families from all over Dongzhou went to Shenhuang City one after another. Today's Shenhuang City is already very lively. At this moment, deep in the sacred land of Yaokai, a woman in a green dress was sitting in front of the throne. She was like a moonlight, emitting a soft glow, like a fairy in Guanggan Palace, holy and charming. In the Yaokai now, her body is the rule, and even the heavenly Dao cannot intrude on it. Everyone is speculating whether the Green Emperor has already ascended to the realm of Yahua. In fact, she has not been promoted to the realm of Yahua, but she has realized the true meaning of Yahua through the blessing of the rune of the word Lin. The so-called Yahua is not something that can be achieved by chance, talent, or brute force. The number of Yahua itself is limited by the universe, and coupled with the shackles of the rules of this world, if it were not for the first seat given by Musian that day, even if she had the strongest strength, she would not be able to ascend to the realm of Yahua. At the beginning, she wanted to protect him for life after the Dao, but she never thought that now even she has touched the threshold of Yahua because of him. How many secrets are there? Yao Meng slightly opened her beautiful green eyes, looked around at the people under the throne, and whispered, "Has he set off?" Her voice was like the sound of nature, with a special Taoist charm in it, and just opening her mouth made the hearts of the Yaokai elders ripple. The realm of the Qing Emperor has indeed improved. Almost everyone had the same thought in their minds. The elder of Yaoqi raised his hand and bowed. Although he was already gray-haired, his face was extremely respectful. Friend Mu has set off 2 days ago. If nothing goes wrong, he will arrive at Yaoqi today. Yao Meng looked around at everyone and nodded with a smile. Thank you for your hard work this time. I'm afraid you have spent a lot of energy to prepare for this wedding. An elder in the audience immediately said with a smile, Saintess, you are joking. You are the first generation of Saintess of Yaoqi. Besides, this wedding is a great joy. How can it be said to be consuming energy? Yao Meng looked at the elders in the audience with a smile. You are quite good at talking. Speaking of which, there was a green light flashing in the attic where Saintess lived a few days ago. Is it because of the improvement of cultivation? At this time, Yao Xian suddenly asked curiously. Yao Xian, don't be rude to Saintess. The elder who was taking care of Yao Xian immediately scolded softly, but his ears moved slightly, a little curious. That's the small dark room I prepared for him. Yao Meng smiled and nodded. It's okay, Yao Xian is right, my cultivation has indeed improved a little. Translation: there are more props in my small dark room, and I am sharpening my knives and waiting for Musian to come. There is still half a month before the wedding. I will be in seclusion in the attic for half a month. You must remember not to set foot without orders. Yao Meng spoke again. Before the wedding begins, I have to ask him for all the frustrations of these days. At this time, a Yaoqi disciple outside the hall walked into the hall quickly, raised his hand and bowed, saying, Saint Lady, Musian is waiting outside Yaoqi. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi raised her eyebrows slightly and said, why don't you invite him in? However, The Yao Qi disciple hesitated and glanced at Yao Meng. Just say it directly, Yao Meng smiled. The Yao Qi disciple hesitated and said, he has someone else with him this time, it seems to be the saint of the southern wasteland. After the words fell, the hall fell into a brief silence. The hatred between the southern wasteland and the Yao Qi Holy Land can be said to be unresolved in this lifetime, and now Musian actually brought the saint of the southern wasteland to the Yao Qi Holy Land to attend the wedding. This sounds incredible no matter how you listen to it. If the Green Emperor had not been present, some of the elders in Yaokai would have been furious on the spot. You and the Green Emperor are getting married, so why invite anyone else to attend the wedding? Why invite the saint of the southern wasteland to Yaokai? When they thought of this, everyone's eyes subconsciously looked at the beauty in the green skirt in front of the throne. Yao Meng crossed her arms and raised a faint arc at the corner of her mouth. Entertain the saint of the southern wasteland well and don't cause trouble. The saint of the southern wasteland will be of great use to me in the future. She paused and continued, invite Musian to my attic. There are some things that I need to discuss with him. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 392. In the main hall. The disciples of Yaokai left the main hall and asked people to pick up Musian, while Yao Xian in the hall held her cheek in hand and suddenly said curiously. There is still half a month until the saintess wedding. Do you want to practice in seclusion in the attic during this time? Yao Meng's red lips parted slightly, and there was a hint of softness in her cold voice. The formations in Yaokai have now been arranged, and I don't need to do anything else for the time being. After saying that, her eyes fell on the Yaokai saint in the palace. Yao Yu, come with me. Before anyone could react, Yao Meng, who was still in the palace before, had already stood up, turned into a ray of blue light, and disappeared. Yao Yu was stunned for a moment, and then she realized what she was doing. A smile appeared on her beautiful and charming face, and she bowed slightly, yes. Yao Xian frowned inadvertently, feeling a little unhappy. As Qing Emperor's little fangirl, Yao Xian has always been very concerned about Qing Emperor's affairs. In the past, she even collected a lot of surroundings left by Qing Emperor in Yaokai Holy Land. She wasn't interested in being a saint in Yaokai, but she couldn't ignore the opportunity to communicate with Yao Meng in private. Why her? Yao Xian muttered. This subtle voice was completely heard by Yao Yu. She glanced at the young girl and said with a smile, Yao Xian, do you know the difference between you and me? It doesn't matter if you got the invitation from the Holy Lady, but now you dare to take advantage of her? Yao Xian was furious, her little brows stood up, and she said angrily, Yao Yu, the saintly lady comes to you just to ask you about something. Do you really think she needs you for something? When Yao Yu heard this, she smiled coldly on the spot and said through her voice, you don't understand feelings. She glanced at Yao Xian indifferently and said with a smile, and I understand, this is the difference. In fact, the biggest difference between her and Yao Xian is not whether she understands feelings, but whether she understands King Di's feelings. She knew that Senior Qing Emperor was greedy for young Master Mu's body, so she did not leave the Liangyi sect after the Immortal Ascension Conference. Instead, she continued to stay in the Liangyi sect to meditate and practice for a few days, and took a look at the situation at Mr. Mu's place. The Holy Lady values Musian so much and is busy with Yaokai affairs these days, so she will definitely care about what happens to Musian in the sect. If nothing else goes wrong, the reason why the Holy Lady came to her this time was for this matter. There is an attic built deep in the Yaokai Holy Land, and the sound of clear springs can be heard nearby. Yao Yu, you have been in the Liangyi sect during this period and only came back a few days ago. Do you know if anything interesting has happened in the Liangyi sect recently? Yao Meng's voice had the texture of jade, soft, soothing and peaceful, and his beautiful green eyes stared at the saint of Yaokai. Sure enough, he asked about this. Yao Yu was not surprised. with a touching smile on his face. If we talk about the interesting things that happened in Lianji sect recently, it seems that it was the alchemy competition after the Immortal Ascension Conference. At that time Mr. Mu is in the limelight. The Holy Lady said she wanted to know what happened in the Lianji sect recently, but in fact, she just wanted to see what Muzian had done in the Lianji sect. And it just so happens that as the Yaokai saint who has been in Lianji sect during this period, she knows more or less about these things. Yao Meng crossed his arms over his chest, with a faint smile on his face. Tell me and listen. At dusk, Muzian and Regina followed a disciple into the Yaokai Holy Land. It seems that Yaokai doesn't welcome me very much. I won't be able to get out after entering Yaokai, right? A soft and pleasant voice came from beside him. Regina looked around casually, wearing a long pale golden dress, and her sword followed not far behind the Yaokai disciple who was leading the way. She naturally knew that she would not be popular in the Yaokai Holy Land. In the southern wilderness, she was a saint, one person inferior to 10,000 people. But in the Yaokai Holy Land, the identity of the southern wasteland saint would only become a burden. After all, when the Qing Emperor returned to the Hedao realm, everyone tried every means to prevent him. The first-generation demon emperor who was the mastermind was dead. But behind the original planning incident, there were the shadows of the southern wilderness and the western region. Muzian waved his hand and said with a smile, "No, not to mention that the matter in Nanhuang has nothing to do with you. Even if it does, they will not make things difficult for you now that the wedding is coming." Regina's beautiful eyes flashed slightly, revealing a pitiful feeling of weakness. She raised her eyes and said softly, "If I really encounter danger in Yaokai, will Mr. Mu protect me then?" "I feel that the tea art is not as fragrant as Naxi," Muzian complained. "Are you close to the realm of returning to the virtual world? If you are really in danger, it is not certain who will protect whom." He paused and continued, "And you are the one I brought, so no matter what, I will ensure that you leave the Yaokai Holy Land safely after this." "What if Emperor Qing doesn't want to?" Regina glanced at him and asked with a smile. "She won't." Muzian smiled. "Nanhuang is not united. The three pillar gods alone have already divided into three forces. What's more, this time he took Regina to Yaokai with Yao Meng's acquiescence. Yao Meng still has this pattern. If she won't let you go then, I'm sure I can convince her." Muzian continued. To persuade a powerful person in the Hedao realm, Regina gave him an angry look, covered her mouth and smiled softly. "Kingdi seems to be kind and gentle, but he will not change his mind easily on matters he has determined. Mr. Mu really cares about him." Confidence. "Then again, you and Kingdi are Taoist couples, and they are about to get married now. Why is she willing to let you be intimate with other girls?" Regina suddenly remembered Muzian's various operations in the Lianji sect during this period, and couldn't help but ask, "And I heard that half a month ago, you went to the Lianji sect from the Yaokai Holy Land, right?" "In the sect during the wedding period, I first went to the pilgrimage hall to enjoy the flowers with the sisters of the Ye family, and then went to Kanghai Peak with Miss Bai. A few days ago, you seem to have gone to Tianqian City with the maid beside you. Could it be that Emperor Qing doesn't care about these things? Back then, I was brought over from Ruoxi by Sister Kingdi." "How could she care?" Muzian said. "Sister is a sister, Taoist couple is Taoist couple. It's different. Ms. Regina treats me, the misunderstanding is a bit deep. Lingxian and Qianer are my sisters, Ruoxi is my Taoist companion, and Sister Kingdi is my wife. As for the senior sister, it was naturally the senior sister, Sister Fei Ying, that was the sister next door who had never disliked him for being a playboy in the past. Anyway, I only have one Taoist companion," Muzian said. Regina snorted, and the corner of her mouth curved slightly. "You'd better go talk to Kingdi about this." Muzian also chuckled. "What a waste of explanation. I went to tell Yao Meng calmly that I have been playing with girls every day for a while. Do you want to miss Shu? Isn't this giving all his handles to Yao Meng? As long as he didn't say anything and Regina didn't mention it, Yao Meng would naturally not ask any more questions. After all, she has been preparing for the wedding and the hidden plans behind the wedding in the Yaokai Holy Land, and it is impossible to have time to take care of the affairs of the Liangyi sect. Although King Di's sister is smart, if she refuses to tell her the truth, can she still catch her? You underestimate my operation too much. Mr. Mu, the Holy Lady invites you to go to the attic where she is retreating. The two were chatting, when the respectful voice of a female disciple came from not far ahead, looking at Musian with a smile. As for Miss Regina, Yaokai has prepared a small garden for you to live in these days. Someone will take you there later. Why did the meeting go to the attic instead of the hall? Musian asked tentatively. Does this sister know what Emperor Qing wants from me? I don't know the specific situation. I'll find out when Mr. Mu goes there, the female disciple said. Having said that, Musian stopped asking questions and nodded slightly. I understand. After saying goodbye to Regina for the time being, Musian moved his sword straight towards the deeper part of Yaokai, while thinking about what Yao Meng wanted to do. I don't know whether it's because of the preparations for the wedding or something else, but the Yaokai Holy Land today is obviously much more lively than in the past. Musian walked unimpeded into the depths of Yaokai and arrived at the attic where Yao Meng lived. Near the attic is a sacred pool. The surface of the pool is spraying with rich spiritual energy, and the surrounding fog is hazy. When you were outside just now, you could see many disciples and elders of the Yaokai Holy Land. But now after you step into this area, there is not even a single figure. Can't see. Musian walked up the stairs and was about to open the attic door when he heard a clear, sweet voice coming from inside. I thought you were lingering in the Liangyi sect, and you were already intoxicated in Miss Bai's arms, or you fell under the pomegranate skirt of the reincarnated queen. Yao Meng is really sharp, almost everything is right, Mu Jian thought to himself. It's true that you can be intoxicated in Ruoxi's arms, and it's not impossible that you can fall under Lingxuan's pomegranate skirt. Can I come in? Musian asked. Wait a minute while I pack my things. If you have anything to say, you can just say it outside first. Although Yao Meng's voice remained as usual, Musian always felt an indescribable sense of crisis. If I don't handle this situation well, maybe my head will be used as a stool by Sister Qingdi tonight. Sister Qingdi has misunderstood me. I have been practicing in seclusion these days. I also hope to improve my strength as much as possible during this period, so as to help you to some extent, Musian expressed. Strong desire to survive. There was silence in the room for a long time, and then he hummed in a reserved voice, it has been more than half a month since you were promoted to the 6th level of Shenlian. It seems that you have been practicing in seclusion during this period. The Tian furnace cauldron is really helpful to you, Yao Meng said meaningfully. After all, I haven't practiced much meditation, so I should try to push my limits occasionally, Musian said with a smile. In fact, he didn't spend much time practicing in seclusion during this period. After all, if he practiced normally, he might not be able to advance to the 1st level in a year and a half. Being able to refine the 6th level of God so quickly was purely a gift given to him by Luo Tan before leaving Liangyi sect. But everything depends on the occasion. If he answers like this now, Musian will probably have to think about life in a small dark room for more than half a month. Yao Meng said meaningfully, your talent is not bad. If you are willing to practice with peace of mind, your strength will naturally improve very quickly. But being able to advance to a level within half a month, I guess it's not a matter of practicing in seclusion, but more of getting some opportunities, right? It's true if I have to say it, Musian hummed and answered vaguely. The spiritual energy given by Luo Tan's natural furnace can be called an opportunity. I'll clean up the room for you, come in. Hearing Yao Meng's soft and soothing voice, Musian stretched out his hand in front of the door and was about to push it open. Then, He quickly fell into a long contemplation. In the next sentence Yao Meng said, "No one will disturb you here, you can be at ease with the pure world vine, and we will leave here together on the wedding day. If everything goes well, maybe we can get married directly. Creaky. As soon as the voice fell, Musian opened the door. In the clean and bright wooden house, Yao Meng was sitting on a wooden chair, wearing a gauze-like green long dress. Under the clothes, her fair and clear skin seemed to be faintly visible, but her body was shrouded in fairy mist, making it difficult to see clearly and always difficult to see her body. Under the green skirt, the pair of plump and slender white legs are slightly together, the jade feet are crystal clear, and the black hair is scattered like a waterfall, which is simply tied up with a ribbon, adding a bit of fairy spirit that is not tainted by the mortal world. Beside her, 2 green vines are twisting like dancing seaweed, which looks a bit out of place. Musian hesitated and said, "Why do you use the pure world seed now?" Yao Meng showed a holy smile on her face. "It's just entertainment, don't worry about it. The entertainment you are talking about is me entertaining you or you entertaining me. There is a big difference between active and passive requests." Yao Meng gazed at Musian and said with a smile, "You look much better. It seems that you have gained a lot of opportunities after the alchemy competition. Born in the furnace, it is really an excellent dual cultivation physique." Musian's heart skipped a beat and he immediately changed the subject. "What do you mean by saying that if everything goes well, we can get married? Is it possible that no one will take this opportunity to cause trouble during this wedding?" "Someone will definitely take this opportunity to make a move," Yao Meng said very confidently. Just like Shang Yanfei is invincible in Lianji sect, Yao Meng is in Lianji sect with the blessing of the formation. No one in the same realm will be her opponent. Therefore, if you want to stop King Di from ascending to heaven, the first step is to find a way to unlock the formation of Yaokai Holy Land. Yao Meng showed a charming smile on her face, but her voice gradually became a little colder. "But I am sure that I can catch all the rats in the dark before they act." Musian nodded slightly as if he suddenly realized. "Well, that is to say, Yao Meng can deal with these people and eliminate the hidden dangers in Dongzhou before the hidden rats take action and before the wedding is disturbed. In other words, on the day of the wedding, it is very likely that no one will take the opportunity to make trouble, because those internal hidden dangers will die before they take action. So I am very likely to marry Yao Meng. And now there is another problem. Yao Meng knows that Luo Tan is a natural furnace, and seems to have guessed that she had met with me privately. But she may not know that I was promoted to the 6th level of soul refining because of Luo Tan's natural furnace, otherwise I would have been locked up in a small dark room by now." Musian's thoughts suddenly short-circuited in his mind. After a calm analysis and a little thought, he raised his head and looked at the pure world vine in the room. "Oh my God, it turns out that I am dead. So, they were the protagonists all along." Author, CCC. Chapter 393. The next day, early morning. In Guixiao Pavilion, Musian opened his eyes from a tired sleep and tried to move his arms, but there was no big obstacle. After taking a look at the layout of the surrounding environment, the ancient coffin obtained from the abyss was still stored in the attic. The pure world vines that filled the sky last night were completely invisible at this moment. There are all kinds of weird props hanging on the walls. It seems like I'm not locked up in a dark room. Fortunately. Musian breathed a sigh of relief. Although Yao Meng looked displeased yesterday, he was still very rational. At least he didn't stuff an indescribable ball into him, but just chatted with him carefully for a while. "Are you finally awake? I thought I went too far last night." A soft voice like the sound of a fairy came from not far away. "Yao Meng." Musian looked slightly sideways. She was sitting on the square table next to the bed. The candlelight lit up the entire cabin, giving her fair skin a warm glow. Musian glanced at her several times, and the perfect arc that her butt made on the square table. "Are you not angry anymore, Musian asked. When I said this, I sighed with regret. I thought Yao Meng would do something after being controlled by the Pure World Vine last night, but it turned out that the Pure World Vine was absorbing his spiritual energy, while Yao Meng was sitting on the bed beside him, chatting with him and watching the show. Are you playing an inch-stop game with me? If I were really angry, I wouldn't be sitting here chatting with you right now. Yao Meng glanced at him. It's not like I don't know about the Tian Tian furnace. If you had practiced dual cultivation with Luo Tan once, you would no longer be refining the 6th level of God, but refining God and returning to the void. Musian was shocked. He held the bed with one hand and sat up. Is the natural furnace cauldron really so exaggerated? The spiritual energy of the natural furnace cauldron I gave to others, ahem, the spiritual energy of the natural furnace cauldron I gave to you seems to have never been so exaggerated. The Tian Tian furnace's own physique is actually not that strong, and it can't increase the strength of others much. Yao Meng swayed the crystal jade feet under her green skirt and said calmly, under normal circumstances, a monk cannot help another monk practice no matter what. Even if he activates some secret methods that can give other people spiritual energy, they can give other people spiritual energy. It's also very limited. But the natural furnace cauldron is an exception, especially the natural furnace cauldron in the Hedeo realm. If it is your first time to practice dual cultivation with a natural furnace cauldron in the Hedeo realm, and get the spiritual energy she gives you plus a wisp of her blood essence, the spiritual energy you can get will be to an extremely exaggerated level. It seems that Luo Tan didn't lie to me. If I practice double cultivation with her once, I can really refine the spirit and return to the void, Mu Jian thought to himself. Assuming that I enter the return to the void realm early in the future and practice dual cultivation with her, I will probably be able to increase my level by 2 to 3 levels, because she is a natural furnace of the Hedeo realm. Yao Meng raised her snow-white chin slightly and said calmly, but in the world today, the only natural furnace cauldron in the Hedeo realm is Luo Tan. Although you are also born with a furnace, she would never notice you even if she thought about it. However, not only did she notice me, but she also coveted my body. Musian nodded slightly. After all, I am only in the realm of refining gods, so it is not obvious how much blessing the natural furnace cauldron has. It is true that his natural furnace cauldron will not have much blessing effect on Luo Tan at the moment, but Yao Meng obviously did not expect that the Medicine King would choose Musian when he was still in the god refining realm. Wait, since it wasn't because of Luo Tan, why did you tie me up last night? Musian suddenly noticed a blind spot. Yao Meng's crystal jade fingers were entangled with a strand of green silk, and she said lightly, you left me in Yaokai without saying a word, but you rode a dragon bird to accompany your little girlfriend to Lianji section. Can't I still be a little kid? Are you going to lose your temper? At that time, she was immersed in the relief and joy that she was expected to break through to the Hedeo realm. She was about to leave the heaven to share the joy with Musian, but when she opened her eyes, no one was there. Musian said sincerely, you were meditating in seclusion at that time. Ruoxi came all the way, and I also needed to participate in the alchemy competition, so I had to leave. I know, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here talking to me right now. Yao Meng stared at Musian with her beautiful green eyes, her eyes full of sultry charm. Bai Ruoxi is your Taoist companion. Since she wants to see you, naturally I can't say anything. Musian's silence is golden, and he said in his heart that you said so. If I really said that I wanted to pick Ruoxi up to Yaokai to accompany me, the purifying vine would probably appear again at this moment. Don't you want to get married? Yao Meng suddenly asked. Musian. When it came to this matter, he was actually quite conflicted. If he said he was disgusted with this big wedding, it would not be wrong. After all, just imagine that after the wedding, Yao Meng was wearing a fiery red phoenix crown and xiaopei, which has a skin bonus. Yao Meng suddenly said with a smile, actually, this marriage may not be possible yet. Musian was slightly startled. Didn't you say yesterday? Yao Meng suddenly stood up and hung in the air. His tall and graceful figure was looming in the hazy fairy mist. He looked at Musian playfully. I'm just joking with you. I'm not concubine Shang Yan. How could I even do this after this, deducing everything that can happen? But no matter whether we can get married successfully or not this time, at least we can clean up the rats that are ready to move around. She said to herself, actually, I don't care very much whether I can ascend, but if I can take this opportunity to seize the handle of the southern wilderness and the western region, I can kill the people involved one by one after I ascend. Find it out. The person involved in the original incident. Musian seemed to have thought of something and asked, you mean the person who secretly caused a stumbling block when you joined the Tao? Yao Meng shook his head and said, not only did he cause trouble for me, but he was also one of the masterminds that caused you to almost die in Yaokai. Musian's heart moved slightly. No wonder Yao Meng would hold this wedding to eliminate internal troubles. Feathering and ascending was just a reason, the more important reason was that she was looking for an excuse to feather and ascend. As long as someone really interfered secretly when she was ascending, she could settle her old and new grudges openly afterwards. If there is a war between Hideo, I'm afraid Dongzhou will also be in chaos, Musian said softly. Yao Meng said calmly, after becoming an ascension, your strength will not increase much, but you will be able to escape from the rules of heaven and earth, and will not be affected by the shackles of heaven and earth, and you will be able to exert your true power. If they become feathers, I'm sure to suppress them. She suddenly chuckled, as for the chaos in Dongzhou, she will tell the truth. As for me. Yao Meng paused and stared into his eyes silently, just be responsible for removing the obstacles in front of you. Musian was silent for a long time before he said, thank you. Are you so confident in the sect master? He asked again. He didn't know who the Shi Yao Meng was talking about was, but he immediately felt that she was the sect leader. What do you think is the reason why the spiritual dragon was not affected by the rules of heaven and earth that day, and allowed its words to affect the entire southern wilderness? Musian hesitated and said, you mean that the sect master protected Sister Lin Ling at that time and blocked the rules of heaven and earth? Yao Meng stretched out his hand and caressed Musian's face, with innocence and charm intertwined in his eyes. Concubine Shang Yan may not have ascended to heaven, but she is definitely not within the rules of heaven and earth. Musian said to himself, in other words, the biggest difference between Yahua and Hideo is that the Yahua state is not within the rules of heaven and earth, so you can use your own power without restrictions. If this is the case, if Sister Mengru reaches the Hideo realm in the future, won't she directly have the strength of the feathering realm? Yao Meng said lightly, maybe. The relatives and friends around me in the past have long been lost in time, so whether it's the southern wilderness or the western region, I don't want to see the people around me hurt anymore. She paused and said seriously, especially my man. Musian stared silently at her beautiful green eyes, and for a moment, he inadvertently looked away. Silence is golden. Do you think you will be embarrassed sometimes? Yao Meng stared at his side face, and the corner of his mouth curved with pleasure. There is still half a month until the wedding. During this time, you can stay here and meditate peacefully. I will take care of the rest. I'm afraid it's not feasible to meditate right now. Musian sighed softly, before that, I have to take Regina to the heavenly pill phoenix tree. Yao Meng frowned lightly and said, I will take care of these matters. You can stay here and meditate in peace. Musian shook his head, you have done so much for me, I can't just watch, right? Yao Meng's eyes flickered, soft at first, but gradually there was a hint of teasing smile. Actually, you are just worried that I will tie you to the house with the purifying vine before leaving, right? As expected of Yao Meng, he really understands my character very well, Mu Jian complained in his heart. Don't worry, I'm not an unreasonable person. I won't want you to stay with me like your little girlfriend does. Yao Meng glanced at him lightly and said calmly, I will go to the heavenly pill phoenix tree with you and protect the law for you. Musian looked at her tall and sexy figure for a few times, and there was a trace of hesitation in his eyes. Just dress like this. This dress is too thin. When Yao Meng wears it indoors, it is a little fun, but if he wears it out like this, it will be a problem. Of course I will change back dash. Before Yao Meng finished speaking, she heard Musian say very tactfully and sincerely, actually, I have prepared a set of clothes for you now. You can try to see if it fits you. He fumbled among the rings for a while and took out a black dress carefully cut to the thigh, a pair of black stockings with beautiful patterns on the thigh, and a pair of high-heeled boots. Yao Meng gave Musian an angry look and said, Why do you carry such a thing with you? Musian coughed lightly and said, In addition to meditating and practicing a few days ago, I also asked someone to customize a set of clothes, but I didn't expect it would fit you so well. Oh, do you dare to say that you didn't customize it specially? Yao Meng, who was as elegant as a flower and didn't like fighting with others, couldn't help but give Musian a disdainful sideways look when he heard this. By the way, this dress and stockings were clearly cut according to her figure. This guy was here for her from the beginning. Yao Meng's green fingers gently stroked Musian's forehead, and she lowered her eyes to look at him. Do you really like me dressing up like this so much? Musian shrugged, Actually, I like whatever you wear. It's pretty good as you are now. I just want to change my taste occasionally. It's quite honest. A beautiful smile appeared on her face, and her beautiful green eyes were full of teasing. Let's talk about it after we get back. After leaving Gi Pavilion, Musian found Regina and took her to the Tiandan Phoenix tree. Yao Meng had already been waiting for the two of them outside the Tiandan Phoenix tree, and said quietly, I will not set foot in the Tiandan Phoenix tree with you this time, but I will let a ray of spiritual consciousness follow you and send you off in half an hour. Leave this cave. Regina raised her eyebrows and said, Mr. Mu, you were unwilling to tell me what you were bringing me to Yaokai all this time. Can you tell me now? Musian smiled and deliberately said, Come in with me first, and you will know soon. Under Musian's mysterious tone, Regina followed him into the cave with confusion and curiosity. Not long after, the two of them entered the depths of the heavenly pill phoenix tree with their swords. When Musian pushed open the heavy door, a woman in a black dress who was trapped in the palace by green vines also followed. Came into view. The light that poured in at that moment made the woman squint her eyes uncomfortably, and then slowly raised her head to look. Musian. Lena shouted softly, and then her eyes quickly fell on the blonde beauty next to Musian. Her eyes quickly lit up, and she said excitedly, Lady Regina. When Musian said that he knew Regina before, Lena had always been skeptical. After all, how could a monk from Dongzhou be involved with the holy maiden of the southern wilderness? But now Regina is indeed appearing in front of him. Miss Lena, can you now prove the relationship between me and Regina? Musian looked at the beauty in black dress with a smile. It looks so astringent when the Jingxi vines are so restrained. I really want Yao Meng to try it too. Lena quickly calmed herself down and nodded slightly, although I don't know why the monks in Dongzhou got involved with Lady Regina. You did not lie before. Nanhuang secretly colluded with the first-generation demon emperor to attack the Yaokai Holy Land. The first purpose was to stop Yao Meng from joining the Tao, but there were other purposes behind the scenes, right? Musian asked, staring into Lena's eyes. However, Lena did not say a word, but glanced at Regina subconsciously. Regina glanced at Musian and said calmly, It doesn't matter, just say it. If it were before, Regina might have hesitated to take into account the secret of Nanhuang, but now she knows that she was born to be a container for others, and all the hard work she has done so far has only become a wedding dress. In the heart of the saintess of Nanhuang, subtle changes couldn't help but occur. The god of the sky is looking for Lady Shuiyi and wants her to be reborn. Lena told the truth. Muzian really didn't lie to me. Regina's beautiful eyes flickered slightly and said, the relationship between the four pillar gods is not as good as it seems on the surface. Why do they put so much effort into it? Just to make southern wilderness grow? Even if you think about it, you know it's impossible. For those gods, there is no such thing as sharing the same hatred and hatred. There should be some secrets that I don't know about. Regina calmed down her thoughts slightly, turned to look at Muzian, and said, Mr. Mu, what will happen to Shuiyi after this? Yao Meng said before that the seal she placed under the Tiandan phoenix tree will not last long, and the seal will be released on its own after that. Muzian looked at the woman in black skirt entangled with green vines and continued, before that, let her stay here. Regina stared at Lena, and for a moment, she nodded silently. No matter what, Lena was also instigated by Nanhuang to come to Dongzhou before, and now she can still survive. The result is already excellent. After all, you must know that the southern wasteland monks who also set foot in Dongzhou before had their spiritual consciousness wiped from heaven and earth by Qing Emperor. Muzian closed the heavy door again, and then turned his head to look at the woman next to him who was wearing a pale gold dress and had a sickly temperament. What are your plans after this? Are you going back to southern wilderness? Regina said quietly, if I go back to the southern wilderness now, I'm afraid I won't be me anymore after Shuiyi returns. Muzian pondered for a long time and comforted him, maybe you can stay in Dongzhou. If you can reach the Taoist realm in the future, you won't have such troubles. When Regina heard this, she couldn't help but let out a chuckle. The cultivation system in southern wilderness is extremely complicated. Even if the rules of heaven and earth are rewritten to allow the emergence of Hedeo realm, it is impossible for another Hedeo realm to appear in southern wilderness. Unless one of the four pillar gods dies. Muzian was slightly startled, then thought of something and said, I have heard that the cultivation system in southern wilderness is different from anywhere else in Kyushu, and the monks there practice faster than any monks in Kyushu. Is this the price? If the four pillar gods do not die, it will be impossible to create a new Hedeo realm. This southern wilderness's cultivation system is somewhat similar to the seat in heaven. The four pillar gods deliberately imposed such restrictions in order to facilitate control of southern wilderness, Muzian asked doubtfully. He rode on Dragonbird's back, and then stretched out his hand towards Regina. With the help of Muzian's strength, Regina jumped lightly and sat on Lonkei's back, a rose-like fragrance emanating from her clothes. She shook her head and said, it's not that the four pillars god deliberately restricted it like this. After all, southern wasteland was not founded by the four pillars god. In the earliest days, its cultivation system was passed down by a mysterious woman. Muzian thought slightly, could it be that the secret technique of black mist was also left behind by that woman? One of the secret techniques of the southern wilderness is the black mist. When the black mist wraps around one's body, one can hide one's aura for a short period of time, and even block the secrets of the universe without being noticed. I don't know about that. What happened at that time is not recorded even in the ancient books of the southern wilderness. Regina shook her head. She looked obviously absent-minded, as if she was still thinking about what Lena had said before. Muzian did not disturb Regina's thoughts. This woman was very smart. Whether she wanted to make a wedding dress for others and give her body to Shuiyi in the future, or to resist, I believe she would figure it out soon. After sending Regina away from the Tiandan phoenix tree, Muzian flew straight towards Gi Pavilion with his sword. After arriving at the attic without any obstruction, Muzian entered the house and thought about everything that happened today. The southern wilderness was not created by the four pillar gods, but by a mysterious woman. If the black mist was also left by her, then the training system of the southern wilderness was probably left by the original witch. Although I like to eat soft food, there are too many mysteries surrounding Sister Mengru. Muzian sighed softly, sat on the soft couch, opened his palms, and a drop of blood essence exuding a terrifying aura appeared in his palms. the essence and blood of the Dengxian realm that was originally obtained in the extreme abyss. He originally thought that this blood essence should be given to a girl around him, but in the past half-month, his protagonists including Wei Mengru had tried it, but no one could refine this drop of blood essence. Is there something wrong with the way I give it, or is it that the essence and blood itself cannot be swallowed by others? Musian looked at the blood essence in his palm and said to himself, I have tried every position, and no one among them can swallow this drop of blood. If the essence and blood of the immortal realm can be refined, its future strength may reach an extremely terrifying level. Musian couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. Unfortunately, he still has no idea how to use this drop of blood essence. What's wrong? I'm sitting alone in the room sighing. At this time, a bright and moving figure in the house appeared silently in the field of vision, accompanied by a soft and pleasant voice. Musian opened his palm, and a drop of blood essence appeared in his field of vision. He sighed softly, before, I thought that the natural furnace cauldron could refine all things and give them to others, but I have tried this blood essence several times, and the natural furnace cauldron cannot be refined. Likewise, it cannot be refined by any one change. Yao Meng walked to the bed and sat down, looking at the drop of blood in his hand, and asked doubtfully, have you tried it on everyone around you? Musian nodded slightly. Then, he suddenly realized something and explained, I just want to test whether this blood essence can be swallowed by others. Before he finished speaking, Yao Meng suddenly said, have you ever tried it yourself? Musian was stunned and subconsciously raised his head to look at Yao Meng. Then, he shook his head helplessly, I can't actively use anything in the Tian cauldron. As he said that, he put his hand down the skirt and hugged Yao Meng's plump waist, gently kneaded it a few times, stared at her and said, speaking of which, you haven't tried it yet? Yao Meng gave Musian a charming roll of his eyes. If you want to practice dual cultivation, just say so and take such a big detour. If something cannot be refined by the Tiansheng furnace, does it mean that you can use it actively? In this case, you can try it first. If it doesn't work, I can try again later, Yao Meng said. That's right, I'll try it myself first, and if it doesn't work, I'll let her try it later when I practice double cultivation with Yao Meng. When Musian thought of this, he kneaded the soft waist of the fairy next to him, and his spiritual consciousness inadvertently swept over the blood essence that dripped into the fairyland. It should be said that he is indeed an immortal who does not belong to this world. When Musian's spiritual consciousness swept across the drop of blood essence, he was completely unable to detect any aura in the drop of blood essence. Musian said helplessly, that's why I told you, it definitely won't work. His voice suddenly stopped. For a moment, the memory that surged in like a tidal wave almost completely swallowed up Musian's consciousness. His vision darkened in an instant, and the strong dizziness made Musian almost fall to the ground. Then, in the endless darkness, a figure seemed to appear vaguely. Musian resisted the dizziness, covered his forehead and slowly raised his head. Is a woman. A woman who looks familiar at first glance, but feels strange at the same time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 394. This cup size looks familiar. Absolutely, I've seen her before, but why does she appear in my memory now? Musian's eyes were dazed, but he was staring at the vague figure in front of him. He was almost certain that he had definitely seen this person in the past, because when he saw her, he had a strong sense of déjà vu, as if he had seen her somewhere before. This was not like we seemed to have seen each other somewhere when chatting up, but he really had an impression. At this time, the woman's already illusory figure was gradually shattering. Musian raised his hand to grab her wrist, but the figure seemed to shatter in his fingertips and turned into bubbles and disappeared. It's so dark here, who am I, and where am I now? Musian's mind was confused, as if it was a ball of paste. He suddenly forgot his identity and didn't know where he was now. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, he heard the sound of war drums, followed by the shocking sound of horns, various shouts and roars. In addition, he could also feel the vast spiritual energy of the demon cultivators and the cultivators colliding with each other. Musian's pitch-black vision suddenly seemed to be split by a ray of light, and he suddenly opened his eyes. The whole world was dark, and even the dark clouds were not there. It was as if the sky had been erased by someone, and the whole sky was in the shape of a black vortex. In the strong suction, a very familiar figure could be vaguely seen. What on earth is this place? It's too outrageous. Even the Kyushu melee can't be so exaggerated. Musian's sight swept across the battlefield, which was full of dead bodies. There was a faint flash of light in the corner of his eyes. He raised his head and looked up. The dark chains fell from the sky and covered the entire battlefield. The woman in black robes stood in the air, looking down at the battlefield full of murderous aura with indifference. It's her. Musian's heart was shaken, staring at the woman in the air, and said her name with difficulty. Sister Menro. This should be the memory left by the drop of blood essence that ascended to the fairyland, and also the things that happened in the past. That mysterious ancient coffin, the person sleeping in it in the past was the original witch? Musian was full of doubts, looked up and stared, and then his mind gradually became clear. By the way, my name is Musian, everything here is a dream. He suddenly remembered his identity, and at this moment, he suddenly saw an unprecedented white light in the dark vortex in the sky. In an instant, it was as bright as day. From the white light, an arrow slowly stretched out. The arrow was rusty and made of bronze. The terrifying pressure almost silenced the previous battlefield in an instant. Whoosh! The arrow fell from the sky and rushed towards Musian. At the same time, the original witch seemed to have sensed something and glanced slightly sideways. The moment their eyes met, Musian only heard a deafening roar in his mind. Boom! Everything in front of him was like a broken mirror, shattered in an instant. Musian covered his chest, gasping for breath, still in shock. What exactly was that place? Just standing there could feel a strong murderous atmosphere, not to mention the monks who participated in the fight. His mind was in a mess, and at this moment, he seemed to hear the sound of a zither in his ears. The zither sound was lingering, as if coming from the fairyland, like a breeze blowing on his face, and it also gradually calmed his previous anxious mood. It was Yao Meng, she was protecting me. Musian's mind stabilized and he slowly opened his eyes. What came into view was a basement where you couldn't see your hand in front of you. Oh my God, why is it a basement? Am I dreaming again? Hearing only the sound of the zither in his ears, but not seeing the person, Musian shook his head violently, slapped himself twice, and suddenly woke up. He looked around, and then secretly rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, this is not the basement, this is Yao Meng's small dark room. The drop of blood essence suspended in the air quietly faded away and returned to Musian's body silently. As if he had noticed something, Musian's mind moved, and his spiritual consciousness swept through the drop of blood essence in his body, but he was surprised to find that this blood essence, which had no reaction to him before, could now refine it autonomously. But then again, am I still in a dream? Why can't I see Yao Meng's trace? After confirming the condition of the drop of blood essence, Musian quickly scanned the surroundings and found that Yao Meng's figure was completely invisible in this room. It seems that I am still in a dream, Musian said to himself. Even the great powers of the same realm may not be able to hear the Qing Emperor playing in person. She treats you very well. At this time, a textured and soft voice suddenly sounded beside him. Musian woke up from his previous sudden realization and turned his head to look at the voice. The original witch. The original witch was sitting on a square table at the side, wearing a black robe as usual, hiding most of her face under the hood, but the slightly tight black robe outlined her graceful figure, giving her the feeling of an abstinent beauty. A pair of snow-white jade feet were revealed under the black robe, and a pair of small embroidered shoes were placed casually under the table, and a pair of beautiful silver eyes stared at him quietly. "Are you awake?" Musian asked. The original witch curled her lips and said calmly, "I was just awakened by the blood essence you refined earlier. I was sleeping comfortably in your natural furnace. But every now and then I can feel that most of the spiritual energy in your natural furnace has disappeared. You are really a busy man." When she said this, she looked at Musian with a smile. In the black mist behind her, it seemed that dark chains could be vaguely seen. Musian coughed lightly to cover up his embarrassment and changed the subject. "Where is this place?" He could clearly feel that although everything here was the same as the Gi pavilion where he was before, they were obviously two different places. "Is it a dream?" Musian continued to ask. The way you changed the subject was too blunt. The original witch narrowed her eyes, but did not continue to struggle. She just smiled and said, "You can understand this place as a dream." "Did you see something in your dream just now?" she asked again. Musian nodded slightly. "I did see a lot of things in another dream." The original witch quietly straightened her sitting posture and stared into Musian's eyes. Musian continued, "I saw you in an ancient battlefield. There were many people in that battlefield, monks singing Buddhist scriptures, various demon cultivators who devoured living beings, and many, many human cultivators. Can you impressed?" The original witch shook her head slightly. "I don't have any relevant memories." It seems that this spiritual consciousness does not have much memory about the original witch. Musian suddenly asked, "Since you don't have any memory, why did you fall in love with me in the first place?" This is a question that Musian has struggled with for a long time. The original witch has been waiting for him since a very early time, but the original witch clearly has no memory of him. The original witch did not answer, but stretched out her hand to straighten his collar carefully. Then, he reached out and grabbed Musian's right hand, and then, under his gaze, he pulled his palm to his chest and said to himself, "Do you know how obsession is formed? Obsession is the persistence of remembering certain people and certain things during my lifetime, and I don't want to forget them even when I die. Therefore, there is a voice deep in my memory that keeps reminding me." She smiled brightly. "It keeps reminding me repeatedly that even if I forget everything, I must not forget you. By the way, the Tiansheng furnace is now blessed by that drop of essence and blood. After this, I will sleep for a while. If I encounter trouble, you can wake me up," the original witch said in a rather brisk tone. "What can I do if I wake you up? Could it be that you can lend me your power like the old man you did before?" Musian thought to himself. As if she saw Musian's thoughts, she smiled and said, "I can lend you my abilities temporarily." "It's really possible," Musian said in surprise. "If I wake you up, what impact will it have on you?" "The speed of warming and cultivating your spiritual consciousness in your natural furnace is much faster than the outside world. Even if you wake up in a short time, it will not have any impact. But..." She paused, took 2 steps forward, put her slender fingers on Musian's lips, raised her head, revealing a face as beautiful as white porcelain, with an elegant smile on her face. "This is a secret between you and me. No third person is allowed to know it." The original witch's body emitted dark spots of light, and her figure gradually disappeared like an illusion. Then, Musian seemed to hear the sound of glass breaking on the floor. He opened his eyes suddenly and found that he was lying in the ancient coffin at some point. His mind was slowly recalling what had just happened. The ancient battlefield in the picture does not seem to be in Dongzhou. Hydrangea flowers are blooming everywhere in the demon realm. It seems that it is not in the demon realm. Previously, He saw all kinds of strange costumes on the battlefield. They were obviously from all over the Kyushu. Most of them were in the Chi and God refining realms, as well as the void returning realm monks at the head. I also saw the great power of Hideo in the heavens. There is no record of such a large-scale battlefield in the ancient books. Or did I just have a dream? No, if it was just a dream, it would be too real, and the lingering fragrance of the original which seemed to still be lingering around me. Muzian took in a breath slowly, exhaled it gently, stood up, and sat up. Suddenly, he heard a soft voice coming from beside him, "Are you finally awake?" He turned around and saw Yao Meng in a green skirt sitting beside the guhan, plucking the strings with her slender fingers, and the fairy sound lingered in the room. Muzian pinched his eyebrows and asked, "How long have I been unconscious?" "About half a day." Yao Meng stood up from the guhan and walked over. His voice was soft and calm, but as beautiful as the sound of nature, and like the summer wind blowing into people's hearts. "You were previously unconscious due to the influence of that drop of blood, but I saw that you were not in any danger, so I played a song next to you to calm your mind." "Thank you," Muzian said sincerely. At the same time, he couldn't help but secretly sigh in his heart. After knowing Yao Meng for so long, he subconsciously ignored that the other party's true identity was the first-generation saint of Yaokai. Not only did the guhan played have the effect of calming the mind, but even the words he spoke at this moment contains fairy charm, like pebbles thrown into the lake, like ripples. Noticing Muzian's sighing eyes, Yao Meng couldn't help but tilted his head slightly. "What's wrong?" Muzian shook his head and said, "It's okay. I'm just used to being with you before. It seems that I rarely see you using your Taoyuan. Every generation of saints in Yaokai Holy Land is familiar with people since birth, and part of the reason for this is because of their Taoist charm. Just opening your mouth will make people feel good about you, and even the fairy sound alone can make people surrender." Yao Meng glanced at him and said with a smile, "Relying on your own charm alone is enough, why do you need to add Taoist charm?" When she said this, she seemed to have thought of something. A teasing smile appeared under her delicate and pretty face. She leaned slightly closer to her ear, and her voice with a special rhyme spread gently in the room like ripples. "Or do you like this tone?" Muzian's heartbeat quickened, but he shook his head reservedly. "I'm not that kind of person." "Oh." Yao Meng raised the corner of her mouth slightly and looked at him with a half-smile. "Do you dare to say that you are not moved at all?" Muzian nodded seriously and said, "That's natural. You may say so, but a woman with clean skin, fair skin, and jade body stands aside and looks down at you. She is absolutely beautiful no matter what angle you look at her from, and it is impossible not to be moved by her heart." What's more, he was already so smitten by Yao Meng yesterday. Today, when he and Regina went to the depths of the heavenly pill phoenix tree, they saw Lena trapped in the main hall by the pure world vines. Sensing Muzian's fiery eyes looking up at him, Yao Meng's pretty face as delicate as snow was unconsciously blushed, but he pretended to be indifferent and said, "Has that woman told everything? Nanhuang wants to resurrect the fourth pillar god, and Regina is the body that the god of space prepared in the past," Muzian said. Yao Meng frowned slightly. How can they be so united? If Shui is reborn, Southern Wasteland will indeed be stronger than ever before, but the status of the three pillar gods will also be reduced a lot. Muzian asked, "Is the fourth pillar god really that strong?" According to legend, Shui is the only god who has met the founder of the southern wilderness. Maybe she left Regina's body behind because she found a way to improve her strength. Yao Meng said softly. Muzian's eyes flashed slightly, and he subconsciously asked, "She also wants to become an immortal?" Yao Meng nodded slightly, "Maybe. But Nanhuang doesn't know where the fourth pillar god is now. I think there won't be any big problems in a short time." Muzian hummed, stretched out his hand to hold Yao Meng's cool and soft hand, and said, "What needs more attention now is your side." As he stood up, he gently pressed Yao Meng's shoulders and made her sit on the soft bed behind him. In the spacious hut, a smokeless charcoal fire burned brightly. Yao Meng sat with her legs bent in front of her body. Her snow-white skin was faintly visible under her thin green gauze. Her breasts were bulging under her gauze, and a hint of her snow-white skin appeared vaguely in the candlelight. Seeing Musian approaching him, the affection in his eyes undisguised, Yao Meng's eyes flashed with a shy light, and then when he was about to lower his head for a kiss, he suddenly froze for a moment and asked doubtfully, "Where does the fragrance come from?" The atmosphere in the room froze for a moment. Yao Meng raised her beautiful eyes and leaned slightly towards Musian's body to smell it. Sure enough, there was a fragrance that did not belong to him. Musian was also puzzled. "You have been with me from beginning to end today. If it really has a fragrance, how is it possible that you and I don't know about it?" "This is true. I have been by Musian's side from beginning to end today. I shouldn't have anyone approach me without knowing it." Is this an illusion? Yao Meng thought to himself. Musian's heart moved slightly as he remembered something. "Speaking of which, I had a conversation with the original witch in a dream before, and she also approached me. Could it be that time? If this is the case, I was not dreaming before, but actually had a conversation with the original witch." Seeing Yao Meng's thoughtful expression, Musian secretly thought something was wrong, so he simply leaned down and buried himself in her arms. Yao Meng seemed to have remembered something, and suddenly said, "Could it be that the seal of the spiritual consciousness in the Tiansheng furnace was unlocked?" She suddenly covered her red lips lightly, lowered her head and looked at the young man in her arms with moist and beautiful eyes full of affection, and said resentfully, "I still have something serious to say to you." This soft voice seemed to be complaining, but instead it felt like a little girlfriend was acting coquettishly. As soon as she finished speaking, Musian put his hands on her shoulders. Under Musian's slight strength, Yao Meng fell down on the bed. With moist eyes, he looked at the beams under the ceiling and under her long skirt. The crystal jade feet tensed subconsciously. There is nothing more important than this now. My 8 Desolations dream map is still a little short of being promoted to the next level. By then, I can barely fight even in the Return to Void Realm. Musian lowered his head and stared at his arms. The beauty said softly. Yao Meng bit her lower lip lightly to keep herself rational, and said softly, "Listen to me first. After the wedding is over, I will clear out everything in the Holy King City and attack the Ascension. When the time comes, the people from Yaokai will take you into the ancestral homeland. If that's the case, is the ancestral land the escape route you have prepared?" Musian said to himself. Yao Meng hummed. Musian was slightly stunned, staring at Yao Meng's ice-like delicate face, and suddenly smiled. "I want to take the back road now, will you take me to visit the ancestral land later?" Yao Meng was stunned for a moment and did not react. Then I saw his direct, obsessed gaze. She glared at him resentfully, and turned away shyly. Her charming profile was tinged with an alluring blush, and her neck was graceful. Under the dim candlelight, the Green Emperor of the Yaokai Holy Land was shy and timid, waiting for the man to pick her. She no longer looked like a big sister who teased people in the past. She pursed her lips slightly, looked angry, and her curled eyelashes trembled slightly because of shyness. There is probably no such a moving scene in the world. Musian stretched out his hand to let her face him, staring at this beautiful face that could overturn the whole country, lifting her snow-white chin, lowering his head slightly, and kissing her plump red lips. Yao Meng's eyelashes trembled slightly, her green jade fingers moved slightly, and finally her hands gently hugged his strong waist, and the blush on her face became more and more moving. Time passed unknowingly, and several days passed in the blink of an eye. As the wedding ceremony was getting closer, the Saint King city was more lively than ever before, with all kinds of strange costumes everywhere. The only thing missing was the demon cultivators from the demon world. At this moment, they were probably still struggling over whether or not to wake up the demon queen. On this day, the several heads and elders of the Lianji sect who came to celebrate had already arrived at the Yaokai Holy Land with several disciples. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 395. There were only a few days left before the Qing Emperor's wedding, and at some point before the wedding began, envoys from various parties in Kyushu had arrived to witness this grand wedding. On the top of Suanya Palace, Muzian put his hands behind his back, overlooking the ancient Yaokai Holy Land. The cold wind was blowing, and his white robe was fluttering in the wind. In his ears, he could vaguely hear the voices of the disciples from the Yaokai Holy Land talking below. "What's wrong, you're so depressed all of a sudden?" Suddenly a soft and sweet voice came from the bottom of his heart, which also brought Muzian back to reality from his previous thoughts. "Is it because I'm getting married soon? But if nothing else happens, this wedding may not be so easy to go through to the end." The biggest difference between the Hedeo realm and the Feathering realm is that the former is within the rules of heaven and earth, while the latter is not within the rules, so his cultivation is not restricted. If the Qing Emperor is promoted and becomes the human emperor, then the first people to be unlucky will probably be the southern wilderness and the western regions, which she once had a grudge with. To prevent this possibility, the first thing they have to do is to unlock the formation of Yaokai Holy Land, and this wedding is the biggest opportunity. Or are you worried that Qing Emperor did too much to you on the night of the wedding? Judging from her attitude towards you in the past few days, she shouldn't have gone too far. Ye Qingxin's tone was a little more, the meaning of ridicule. Now Qingdi doesn't know that the seal of Jingxi Qinglian has been lifted. Except for one night in the past 2 days when Muzian's spiritual energy was consumed a bit, the spiritual energy of the natural furnace cauldron was lost in a stable manner. Muzian was not in a joking mood. The cold wind blew his forehead, revealing a handsome face. His back was bleak, and he said quietly, "Ruoxi and the others seem to have come today." Ye Qingxin hummed, "Didn't you tell them that this wedding has another purpose? They should understand it, right?" "If it were me, I would naturally understand you," she continued. I understand. Sister Ye has a broad mind, as big and full as yours. The other girls around me are smaller." Muzian heard Ye Qingxin praising herself. "I told them about the wedding before, but Ruoxi and the others didn't say much," Muzian said. However, even though he said so and they all acquiesced, if in the end the people hiding in the dark were afraid of Yao Meng's remaining power and continued to hibernate in the darkness to watch them get married, then didn't I burp my butt? It can be said that Mr. Mu sacrificed a lot for Yao Meng's plan this time. Sister Ye, do you think the power of the measuring ruler is comparable to the ancestral weapon? Muzian suddenly asked. That's natural. The Wenchen lock was most likely the weapon of the Lord of Heaven in the past. It can change the most suitable weapon according to the owner's personality. Even if it loses its divinity, its power alone is no less than the ancestral weapon. With a trace of doubt in Ye Qingxin's eyes, she said, "Why do you ask this so politely?" Muzian said sadly, "I was just thinking, if there are more than 3 ancestral weapon locks binding me together, can the heaven measuring ruler be unlocked?" Ye Qingxin. "Forget it, it's okay, I'm actually fine." Muzian shook off his sorrowful thoughts, and was about to jump off the palace and go back to meditate, when he suddenly noticed a gust of fragrant wind coming from his side. Although the other party deliberately concealed his aura, Muzian still captured the woman behind him immediately. He pretended not to notice and vaguely heard the sound of slight footsteps coming from behind him. "Mr. Mu, are you waiting for me to sneak up on you? You've noticed it a long time ago, right?" Suddenly, a sickly and soft voice came from behind. Muzian just turned his head to look, but Regina had turned into an afterimage and appeared in front of him the next moment. A fragrance like a rose came to his face, and then, that exquisite face full of exotic charm came into view. Their faces were almost close to each other, as if they could feel each other's breath close at hand. "Regina, When did you come up? Musian looked surprised. The beauty with long pale golden hair looked at him with a smile and said calmly, young Master Mu is really good at acting. You have a chaotic constitution, and it contains a natural spirit body. How could you not know that I secretly came to find you? Musian shrugged, since you know that I am a chaotic body, why do you go out of your way to hide your aura secretly? Regina smiled sweetly, I just want to test how different your natural spirit body is from Miss Yes. Musian stared at her. Today, the holy maiden of the southern wilderness was wearing a dress with dark patterns. She had delicate facial features, a pair of sickly beautiful eyes filled with moisture, and her fair skin looked a little pale. She looked like a young lady who had lived in seclusion for many years. And the black dress brought out the snow-white skin. What's wrong? Mr. Mu will be a married man soon, so we have to keep a little distance between you and me, Regina giggled. Musian looked away and said, I feel relieved to see that you are in a much better mood. Regina was stunned for a moment, then chuckled, what does Mr. Mu mean by this? If Shui finds you in the end, I'm afraid only one of the spiritual consciousnesses between you and her can survive in the world, right? Musian said. During this period, I'm afraid you have been troubled by this matter for a long time. Regina was silent. Musian was right, she had indeed been thinking about this matter in the past few days. She is the doll that Shui had prepared in the past. Once the three pillars of the southern wasteland find Shui, they will let her spirit devour them, and there will be no Regina in this world. If my spirit disappears later, the agreement between you and me can be cancelled. Regina suddenly chuckled, Mr. Mu can trade the natural fetus and reincarnation spirit with others at that time. Are you afraid of death? Musian asked calmly without any expression. She nodded gently, but soon shook her head. Don't worry, Dongzhou now has 4 complete Hedao realm. If you stay in Nanhuang, the 3 pillars will not dare to come to you in a big way. Besides, they don't know where Shui is now. Even if they know, the 3 pillars will not dare to act rashly before Yao Meng passes the tribulation and ascends to the immortal realm. Musian laughed, I didn't expect that the arrogant saint of Nanhuang would also be timid. I just feel that if I give away my hard work for so many years so easily, I will feel very unwilling, Regina said softly. Then stay in Yaokai and practice first. Musian smiled and said, before the agreement between you and me is reached, I will ensure that you are still alive. Regina smiled silently. She wanted to say that you, a 6th grade soul refiner, could change anything, but thinking about it, Musian was the only one in the whole Zhou who would say this to her, so she remained silent. I'll go back first. She turned and disappeared from the temple, walking among the disciples of Yao Qi, but she didn't fit in with the people around her and seemed a little lonely. After returning to the attic, Musian sat cross-legged on the soft couch and stretched out his palm. In his palm, a drop of blood essence with a soft halo appeared in his vision. This drop of blood essence is suspected to be left by the fairyland. I'm afraid no one in this world can refine it except the queen of the demon world. But Musian is an exception. If it is refined, I don't know if there will be any sequelae. Musian sighed with some worry. A few days ago, he fainted directly when he just used his spiritual consciousness to scan this drop of blood essence, and he also had a dream. If it is refined, it is still unknown what will happen. This is also the reason why Musian has not refined this drop of blood essence in the past few days. I wonder if the blood essence of the immortal realm is the same person as the owner of the ancient coffin. Musian clenched his fist slightly and took the drop of blood essence back into the natural furnace, then looked at Ye Qingxin who was sitting lazily in front of the soft couch beside him. Sister Ye, do you no longer need to stay in my natural furnace to nurture your spiritual consciousness? You seem to come out quite frequently during this period. Ye Qingxin knew that this guy had something to say, and a hint of charm flashed across her beautiful eyes. Her jade feet under the black and red dress swayed, and she glanced at him slightly with a faint smile in her eyes. Don't worry that the Green Emperor will notice my presence. She is still in Swanyu Hall at this time to explain the follow-up plan with other Yokai elders. When she said this, she crossed her arms and sat with her legs crossed, smiling, and, you seem excited too, right? So when did she awaken this N.T.R hobby, Musian complained in his heart, and then silently looked at the beauty sitting in front of the soft couch, and the chest that was set off to be particularly large. I have to say, this is really big. Ye Qingxin followed Musian's focused gaze and looked at her full and upright chest, and seemed to understand something. However, instead of avoiding suspicion, she held her chest with a calm expression. If you have the courage, you can try to rub it, provided that you are not worried that the Green Emperor will suddenly come back and see the scene. Musian calmly withdrew his gaze, closed his eyes, and remained calm. Oh, do you really think that I will be blinded by beauty? I really want to suppress her now? This woman has come out to tease him several times during this period when Yao Meng left, but this place is really unsafe, and Musian dare not gamble. If this scene is roughly translated, it means, when the wedding is about to take place, the bride Musian talks secretly or even intimately with another person in the bridal chamber behind the groom. Although Yao Meng often goes to Swanyu Palace to arrange subsequent plans in the past few days, no one can guarantee whether she will come back the next moment. Moreover, Ye Qingxin is the type that only allows to be seen but not touched. During this period, Musian's appetite has been firmly grasped. If it weren't for the fact that Sister Ye's spiritual consciousness alone had reached the peak of the return to Void Realm, he would have to suppress this woman and spank her right now. Forget it, I won't tease you today. A trace of joy flashed across Ye Qingxin's beautiful eyes, and her brows relaxed. She said, the wedding is coming, and there may be some unrest in the next few days. I will ensure your safety in secret, but you must be careful in everything. As for whether to refine that drop of blood essence, it depends on you. Musian nodded slightly and remained silent. If he refined that drop of blood essence, his strength might be able to reach an extremely terrifying level in a short period of time, but at that time, just scanning that drop of blood essence with spiritual consciousness had such a big side effect, not to mention that he wanted to use that blood essence for his own benefit. In fact, it doesn't matter if you keep that drop of blood essence in the natural furnace. Ye Qingxin's cold voice suddenly softened a bit, and she reached out and gently stroked Musian's face, saying, whether it's for Jian'er's sake or because the deal between you and me has not been reached, I will guarantee your safety before you realize the truth. Is there no other reason? Musian suddenly asked. Ye Qingxin was slightly stunned. Under the intertwined gazes of the two, Musian seemed to vaguely see the red gold flames jumping under her cold and elegant figure, which looked extremely sacred. And the cinnabar on her forehead and even the pair of enchanting beautiful eyes added a bit of enchantment to her. Ye Qingxin did not answer, but supported Musian on both sides with her slender hands, slightly moved forward, and gently kissed him on the lips. Staring into Musian's eyes, a faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Other reasons, what do you think? Musian was about to reach out and hug her plump waist, but the next moment, Ye Qingxin had already left Musian's arms under a teasing look. The next moment, she had turned into a ray of fiery red light and quietly returned to Musian's natural furnace. The winter sun was shining outside the house, and the lingering sound seemed to be faintly heard in the attic, which was particularly comfortable. This woman really likes to play. Musian touched his lips slightly, then took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and calmed down. Looking at the drop of blood in his palm, his eyes gradually calmed down. No matter what, you have to try it. Perhaps if you refine it, you can know who left this drop of blood. Moreover, she must have some strength, so that she can be taught a lesson in the future, so that Sister Ye will know what will happen if she teases Master Mu. Outside the gate of Yaoqi Holy Land. Everyone, Please follow me. Lady Saint has prepared an empty room in the palace for you. A Yao Qi disciple in a white dress smiled and looked at the disciples and the head who came from Lianji sect with a respectful tone. Ya Lingxian smiled and suddenly asked, Sister, do you know where Muzian is now? Bai Ruoxi, who was not far from Ya Lingxian, also looked up. She had a gentle temperament and a pair of gentle eyes that could make people's hearts melt. The female disciple was distracted for a moment and subconsciously said, Mr. Mu is practicing in the Gi Pavilion where the Saint Lady is in seclusion. The Qing Emperor is in seclusion in the Gi Pavilion. Bai Ruoxi's eyes flickered, then she looked up and smiled gently, Thank you, sister. The female disciple suddenly looked dazed, awakened from her previous absent-mindedness, and looked at Bai Ruoxi a few more times with fear. I didn't notice it before. This woman looked weak, but she seemed to be born with charm. I was confused after just exchanging a few words with her. These people are not good people. The female disciple gathered her thoughts and only wanted to complete her task as soon as possible. The crowd walked through several palaces, along a wooden staircase, and stopped in a private room on the 8th floor under the guidance of a female disciple. If you have anything else to say, just tell the disciples here. The female disciple smiled and said, then turned and left. Do you want to go over and take a look now? Wei Mengru was as cold and arrogant as ever, and asked softly. Bai Ruoxi shook her head gently and said softly, he should have known about our arrival a long time ago. Since Mu Lang didn't come, he must have been delayed by something. Let's wait a little longer. If Muzian was present, he would probably sigh, Ruoxi is really worthy of being a good girl next to Mu Lang, so considerate, gentle and sensible. Lan Murian sneered, I'm afraid that after living here for a few days, he has forgotten that he has a Taoist partner. The Green Emperor is as beautiful as a fairy, and he is born with a Taoist fetus. Everything he says and does is full of special fairy charm, which is irresistible. If he speaks to his junior brother in that kind of heart-stirring voice, it would be strange if he could refuse. She is a friend of the Saint of Yaokai, so she knows something about this special physique. Lan Feiying's charming and affectionate peach blossom eyes looked at her sister meaningfully, and a faint smile appeared on her exquisite face like a jade carving. She suddenly transmitted a voice, Sister, are you fighting for Miss Bai, or are you fighting for the fact that you were ignored by that guy? Lan Murian raised her eyebrows slightly, as noble and cold as usual, but her beautiful eyes were a little colder, and she glanced at her sister. At this moment, Yechian suddenly seemed to sense something, turned her head and looked behind her, and whispered, Master is here. As soon as the voice fell, the atmosphere suddenly stagnated, and the cold senior sister looked behind her with a cold look. A ray of green light fell silently at the entrance of the stairs, turning into a misty figure. Bai Ruoxi looked at her with gentle eyes and said, Senior Kingdi has prepared his plan? How come you have the leisure to come here? Yao Meng smiled and said, I'm just worried whether you will get used to living here, but it seems that you should be satisfied. When she said this, her eyes fell directly on the mature queen in a loose white robe behind Ye Lingxian. If even you are here, then I can be much more at ease this time. The reincarnated queen stared at Yao Meng with doubt, and suddenly whispered, Strange, your breath. Before she finished speaking, Yao Meng put her slender jade fingers in front of her lips, with a kind smile like a big sister next door. The reincarnated queen was silent in her heart, silence is golden. Yao Meng looked around at the beauties present and said with a smile, Thank you all for participating in this wedding this time. Also, he will trouble you when I am in the process of transcending the tribulation. Watching Yao Meng's departing figure silently, Ye Lingxian turned her head and looked at the reincarnated queen behind her. This woman was a doll she had made in the past, and she had her own consciousness. In a sense, Regina and the reincarnated queen were the same type. She was called a doll, but in fact, there was no difference between her and a person. What did you want to say just now? Ye Lingxian asked. The breath of the Green Emperor is a little bit wrong, the reincarnated queen whispered. Ye Lingxuan's eyes revealed a trace of doubt, and asked, what do you mean? The breath of the Green Emperor is very weak, at least I felt that she seemed to be only at the peak of the return to void just now. The reincarnated queen said. For an existence like the Green Emperor, if she deliberately hides her own breath, it is difficult to detect it easily even if she is at the same level. But the reincarnated queen is an exception. She can share Ye Lingxuan's physique. The natural spirit body in the Hedeo realm is not a little bit stronger. How is it possible? Bairuoxi said almost subconsciously. The Qing Emperor reunited his immortal body and even possessed the Dao Yun, blending with the Dao. It is obvious that he cannot be in the Fangxi realm. She won't lie to me. Ye Lingxian looked at this mature 3-0 queen and her pair of chests that were particularly round and upright against the white robe. Her eyes flickered slightly and she whispered to herself, Qingdi, what are you paying attention to? The girls present were secretly guessing why Yao Meng's breath was so weak at the moment, but Wei Mengru, who had been silent in the corner, suddenly seemed to have sensed something, subconsciously raised her head, and looked in the direction of Gi Pavilion. She looked a little dazed, closed her eyes slightly, and seemed to be feeling something. Sister Mengru, are you okay? Ye Qian noticed the abnormality at the first time and reached out to grab Wei Mengru's slightly cold and soft little hand. Wei Mengru slowly opened her beautiful eyes and whispered, my third spiritual consciousness is also with him.